Now, we're expecting things to get underway in about 50 minutes' time, but ahead of that, let's bring in our panel who will help guide us through and interpret what we're about to see today, beginning with Julie Van Dusen, veteran journalist, frequent contributor to CPAC. Chris Hall, also a veteran journalist who these days is a managing principal with Navigator. Kristy Kirkup, national reporter with the Globe and Mail, and at Rideau Hall, CPAC's Andrew Thomson. Andrew, good to see you. We'll get to you in a moment, but I have to start here at the panel because literally just minutes before we went on air, in addition to the big news of this cabinet shuffle, because we're now getting names, we are also getting some big news on two fronts. One, Jagmeet Singh saying the NDP will be voting against the Liberals at the first opportunity in a matter of confidence in the new year. And then Rob Oliphant, who of course was a junior minister in Trudeau's government, publishing a letter this morning just after a meeting of his riding executive in Toronto, essentially saying it is time for Justin Trudeau to step down. And, he says, I'm friends with Justin Trudeau, but to protect the legacy and the record of this government, he needs to leave. Julie, the impact of these two major letters coming out just moments before this cabinet shuffle.
Yeah, it kind of blows everything up again. I mean, if his goal, the Prime Minister, was to project stability and make it look like we're in charge here, there is a cabinet, people have jobs to do, I'm plugging the holes. If it was to project unity, that's all falling by the boards, because every 2 minutes someone else is coming out saying, I'm not, he's got to go, or I'm not going to run under him, or whatever. And now that Jagmeet Singh has made it clear, because for the last couple of days, we were hearing two stories after his news conference last week, where he said, the Prime Minister has to resign, and people were pressing him, well, what are you going to do to help that happen? And he wasn't clear. And Peter Julian, the House Leader, came out and said, it'll happen. But it was unclear, because then Singh said, in an interview a couple of days ago, like, why would I box myself in? Well, now he's being clear, and he's doing it right before the Prime Minister's shuffle happens. So that's like all around not good news. Yeah,
two big side swipes, in addition to the side swipe from Chrystia Freeland to start the week off. Chris, what do you make of all this?
Well, narrative is really important in politics, setting out this is a cabinet shuffle that will show that I am still in control if I'm Justin Trudeau, and that we have the right team now to go forward. All of that is lost because we're talking about people who want him to leave. And that's the big question that remains unanswered, Michael. Will Justin Trudeau take that walk in the snow like his father did some 40 years ago, or is he going to try to stick it out? Given what we're hearing today, his time shelf now, or shelf life, is limited, because Jagmeet Singh says he will, if forced, will introduce a non-confidence motion as soon as he can when the House is back in session in the spring. So we're looking at a spring election campaign no matter what, and as a result, whatever these people are, or the people he's putting into these places now to fill the vacancies, it's not clear that they're going to have much of a runway to get anything done.
Yeah, especially since the House does not get back until the end of January already. Kristy, what do you make of these two letters that were published just moments ago?
Yeah, I think that definitely this was a moment, to Julie's point, where Jagmeet Singh, I think, really had to to pick a lane. It was starting to get a bit, frankly, I think, uncomfortable for New Democrats to be criticized, really, for continuing to support Justin Trudeau, given the fact that, I would say everyone is saying the writing is on the wall. The Liberals are saying it's over. This is the dying days of this government. And so I think, Jagmeet Singh made this strategic play today, clearly upending the news cycle, as we've discussed. And again, now it's a matter of time before Canadians are heading to the polls. And the central question, again, being, is it with Justin Trudeau at the helm? We know that he loathes Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He wants to fight him. Everyone talks about Justin Trudeau wants to get in the boxing ring, if you will, and fight Poilievre. He's dedicated a lot to the Liberal Party, and he, I think he does want that fight. The problem is that increasingly everyone around him is saying, you're not up for the job. And I think Chrystia Freeland really had that mic drop moment earlier this week, and now we're seeing other wheels fall off the bus again, including Rob Oliphant, again, and trying to be kind in his polite, but saying, it's time to pack it in.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting, though, right? Because the messaging around this is that, we've accomplished a lot as a government, but Justin Trudeau, as great as he was, he's no longer the man to lead us into the fight. And certainly when you talk about Justin Trudeau wanting to fight Pierre Poilievre, that's universal across the Liberal caucus. They just don't, they're just not convinced about Justin Trudeau. So much so, Chris, that, reportedly, backbench MPs were offered a position in cabinet, and they said, no, I'm good. That's fine. Thank you.
I heard heard a lot of that too, because remember, the original theory was he was delaying a cabinet shuffle to keep backbenchers in line. And now he's made some offers, and we get to the names eventually, some of those people are in junior positions, but a lot of others who have been around longer are still going to be cooling their heels in the backbenches. So we did hear that some people didn't want to move from the cabinet posts they have now. Francois-Philippe Champagne, who is the Innovation Minister leading that particular group, and those who didn't want to go, and I don't have any names for you, but it's clear that this took as long as it did, and some of the people who are on that list are not people we would have been expecting as first choices.
Yeah, well, let me pick up on that point then, because, you know, the names have been circulating this morning, and I will say that CPAC's been able to obtain a list of names as well. We'll have to back check it eventually up against what is there, but this is what we're hearing at this moment in time. Rachel Ben-Dayan becomes Minister of Official Languages, Associate Minister of Public Safety. Elizabeth Briere becomes Minister of National Revenue. Terry Duguid becomes Minister of Sport, responsible for Prairie's Economic Development Canada. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith becomes Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Darren Fisher becomes Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. David McGuinty becomes Minister of Public Safety. Ruby Sahota becomes Minister of Democratic Institutions, Minister responsible for Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. Joanne Thompson becomes Minister of Seniors. Those are the backbenchers that are being elevated. And on top of that, we're looking at Anita Anand becomes Minister of Transport, Internal Trade. Gary Anandasangari becomes Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, so that gets added on to him. Steve McKinnon becomes Minister of Employment, Workplace Development, Labour, who we see there right now walking up to Rideau Hall. Jeanette Patipa-Taylor becomes President of the Treasury Board, so no longer Anita Anand. So shifting here, elevations here. What do you make of these names, Julie? Again, backbench MPs, to Chris's point, some of whom most Canadians don't know.
Well, and they won't know their chauffeurs' names for more than about 15 minutes. I mean, this is the problem. They're going to be in cabinet for a very short period of time. And it looks great on your resume, and people will say, wow, you were in cabinet. Yeah, for like 20 minutes. You're rhyming them all off. I recognize a lot of those names, but do you think out there on the street?
You live on the hill.
But do you think out on the street most people are going to know that? Of course, here in Ottawa, we know David McGuinty. He's been around for 20 years. There are people with stature there, and I'm sure a lot of them thought to themselves, do I want to take this? I mean, David McGuinty, he's head of the Committee on Parliament Hill for Security and Intelligence, and NTCOP, And, you know, the bottom line is he's a man that has a lot of knowledge, right? And we saw him in a scrum not too long ago talking about Chinese interference and stuff. He has a lot of knowledge, and now he'll be able to talk about at least some of it in a contextual way, doing this big job for public safety. But the whole thing is for how long? So they're going in there knowing Jagmeet Singh is now part of the puzzle that's going to bring them all down. Yeah. So it's kind of supply teachers. The real teachers, who knows when they'll show up.
Well, and I think fair to say, you know, Justin Trudeau did not see Christopher Freeland resigning Monday. I don't think they necessarily saw Jagmeet Singh making a decision at this moment in time, Chris.
Well, this is the thing. I said narrative is important in politics. So if I'm looking at the list of the people who are here, no matter how long they stay, what are the two things that Justin Trudeau needed to do to establish that we are a government that is still focused on the needs of Canadians? The first thing, housing's a big issue. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith did run his provincial Ontario Liberal leadership campaign around housing, but he's also a guy who's a bit of a maverick. You know, will he stay on message? It's possible he will, given how short the time is.
Although one of the strongest communicators for someone who's not actually in cabinet until now.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And had a really good interview with Justin Trudeau on his podcast. The other one is Donald Trump. Who is going to lead the file dealing with the Canada-U.S. relations? It's not Kristy or Freeland. We now know that. Is it Dominic LeBlanc going to add that to finance? Is it Melanie Joly or Mary Ng, who's the international trade minister? It is not clear to me how this is a better positioned cabinet to deal with the tariffs that may be coming and all the other chaos that Donald Trump wants to sow south of the border.
Okay, listen, I'm going to bring you in a moment, Kristy, but let's go right now to Andrew Thomson at Rideau Hall, because we're seeing Elizabeth Briere walk up there, getting ready for being sworn in by the Governor General. Andrew, hello to you. So we've seen Elizabeth Briere, we saw Steve McKinnon. Walk us through who else you've seen entering Rideau Hall this morning.
Hi, Michael. Yes, we've seen most of the names that you read off a few moments ago heading in with their families here through the main door of Rideau Hall. That ceremony, as you say, getting underway in a few moments. Let's start with those backbench MPs who are being elevated to cabinet roles. We did see Nate Erskine-Smith, the MP for Beaches, East York in Toronto. We appear to have another MP coming in right now as well that appears to be Darren Fisher, the MP for Dartmouth, Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Of course, with Sean Fraser expected to leave cabinet because he's not running for re-election, that means there is an opening to have a cabinet minister from that province. I mentioned Nate Erskine-Smith from Toronto. We also saw, you just talked about David McGuinty. He is inside Rideau Hall, MP for a nearby riding here, Ottawa South. So he is here. We also saw Rachel Bendayan arrive a few moments ago with her family, the MP for Outremont since 2019, the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance. We have seen as well Terry Duguid arrive, the MP for Winnipeg South. He's been acting as parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister. And we are also seeing current members of cabinet who are going to be switching their roles. We just saw Steve McKinnon come in a few moments ago. You mentioned Anita Anand, who has been doing this double duty task as Treasury Board President and Transport Minister. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor has also been taking on several cabinet roles, and she just came in a few moments ago, Michael. So the roster is just about here as they get settled into that room inside Rideau Hall for that ceremony.
So that ceremony, it's scheduled to begin in about 3 minutes' time. Andrew, thank you for that. We'll get back to you a little bit later. But, you know, as the people are still making their way into Rideau Hall itself, probably going to be a couple of minutes off in terms of timing. But let's keep discussing these cabinet elevations, particularly with the backbenchers, Kristy, because, you know, on the one hand, you get to, as a Prime Minister, reward people who have been loyal soldiers to the front benches of government. But it also is a bit of a risk, isn't it? Because it also means to say there are people that have been left out all this time and continue to be left out who might then be emboldened to join the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was important when Chris highlighted Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, and again, he has always been that MP that if you called him up, you knew that he would actually speak his mind and he wasn't going to, you know, go back to talking points. He is very smart, obviously. Again, Chris mentioned the run provincially, and you know, the creation really of this podcast, right? And we saw actually the Prime Minister sit down with Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, and they had a very candid conversation where I thought it was fascinating to watch. It was about 58 minutes long. I'm such a nerd that I actually know exactly how long it was. Let's just own that fact. And you know, Nate was putting you know, some tough questions to the Prime Minister, and including on, you know, essentially how did you let it get to this point? And the Prime Minister explained kind of all of the pressure points that were happening internationally, including with the war in Ukraine, and that he didn't really, you know, he explained that he didn't really want to go after Pierre Poilievre right out of the gate when he became leader, and he thought essentially he could turn his attention to domestic matters when, you know, it was closer to an election, and at least gave us a little bit of a window into some of his thinking. But Nate is the type of person, again, both publicly and privately, I think he tells it like it is. And so on an issue like housing, again, to Chris's point, he does have a lot of experience in terms of, like, you know, researching and talking about this file and understanding why it's so important to Canadians. So I think of all the names, I'm frankly, I don't think I ever expected there would be a day that Nathaniel Erskine-Smith would end up in I don't think he expected.
Well, he wasn't going to run it.
Exactly, which is to be seen, because there's now nomination processes underway in his riding in Toronto, right? So
I mean,
as they look for another candidate.
Can I add one thing to this? We have been waiting now for 4 days for Prime Minister Trudeau to respond to Chrystia Freeland and to talk about a cabinet shuffle, what his own future is. He's not scheduled to speak today. There is a cabinet meeting at 3 o'clock. But the longer he waits, the more difficult it becomes. And I wonder today, with Jagmeet Singh's letter in particular, if he will feel compelled to come out and talk about why Chrystia Freeland left and why he felt it was important to move her out of finance 3 days before she was to deliver a fall economic statement. He needs to actually assert some control here. He has to tell Canadians, we will remain focused on the issues that matter most to you, despite what you're hearing in the background about a potential non-confidence motion in the future.
But how could anyone believe that? That's the problem.
Yeah,
he might have a light bulb moment saying, okay, I guess as soon as I walk into the House of Commons, you know, that's it for me. But if he comes out and says, you know, I'm here to fight and all that, no one's going to buy that. If he says, I'm going to prorogue, he still has to go into the House at some point and get tossed aside. Does he know, like if he knows the writing is on the wall and he's painted in the corner, will this be a light bulb moment for him? Will he have to say something? Or is he going to do what others have said he's going to do, which is reflect and maybe say something later? Well, who knows, right?
Yeah, well, who knows? Although, with this letter from Jagmeet Singh, does it not essentially force prorogation to actually happen? Because if he knows that he's going to be voted down, it seems to be the get out of jail card, at least in the immediate term.
What would he do if he prorogues then? So what what
leadership
purpose?
Race, resign in leadership race during a prorogation.
Right. Okay. Then there's all the how does that work and how much time and who negotiates with Trump and all that stuff. Right?
There are a couple of things. Donald Trump will become president on January the 20th, and there's no government really to speak of. I guess the Prime Minister does become the spokesperson on that. But the other thing is, just very quickly, there are two really significant bills that will die if Parliament is suspended. One of them being the Implementation Act, the second one for the federal budget, and the Fall Economic Statement has created this big havoc in the first place. So it's a risk. It would need to be a really quick turnaround if he steps aside, even if there is prorogation. I happen to think that he's got time. He's got until January 28th, when the House is supposed to come back, to decide what he wants to do and to work with the party to set up a potential leadership race if he decides to leave.
Yeah, but
what is he waiting for? What's going to change? That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. It's like, how is this? The thing I always think about with Justin Trudeau is he is, and forgive me, I'm going to try out an analogy here, but he has been the equivalent of a political Teflon pan. And there have been multiple controversies that have never stuck to him, including a blackface controversy during an election campaign. There are very few people world over that would be able to survive a controversy like that. Yeah. And there's long been this feeling that, you know, when people count him out, that he digs in harder. And frankly, evidence has shown that he's been able to turn it around. As far as polling is concerned, it has been extremely concerning for the Liberals for, 6 months now or more?
They've been behind for well over a year.
And he hasn't been able to turn it around. So what would change between now and the end of January to make him think, okay, yeah, like I think that somehow we're going to be able to pull this rabbit out of the hat. I'm open to hearing what the evidence would be for him, but I think this moment is different. The Freeland moment is different. Everything about this moment means that, again, people are saying his time has run out, and that Teflon pan, if you will, it's just like, you know, there's shelf lives for prime ministers, and a lot of people think, you know what, like you've done the thing for almost a decade. It's time to call it quits.
Well, and part of the role of a leader, party leader, is to demonstrate the judgment, right? And still, when it comes to Chrystia Freeland, the big question mark for me is, how did he not know that she would react negatively to what was being proposed to her? If you go through her letter being proposed on Friday, that you would have to, we're going to push you aside, but at the same time, we're going to make you read an economic statement that you are not supportive of. How did he not know that would blow back? And so if part of a role for a leader is to demonstrate judgment, it has his course run out in terms of his political skills alone, let alone the political moment and the way Canadians are judging him.
Well, I mean, if you're to be, and that letter was scathing. I mean, I have a copy of it here. I keep circling it. It was brilliantly done. Because, I mean, on one hand, it praised the fact that I've been in this government, I'm really appreciative, and so on. And then she just lets him have it with one zinger after another, right? In terms of how much money is spent on these little gimmicks and so on. But, you know, there's all these stories going on, and we know what the letter says. But wouldn't it be great to sit them down and find out the backstory? I mean, are any of these stories true that we're hearing that, you know, Trudeau did what he did, and then he thought everything was okay, went off to have his weekend and didn't know she was so ticked off? You know, I mean, but to do that move, to say, oh, hey, go out and wear the not $40 billion deficit, the
$62 billion yearly.
Yeah, go out and wear that and do your speech in the House, and then we'll turn it over to Mark Carney and he'll figure it all out. like, I don't know in what world he thought that would be okay.
Well, add to that rather, because you say Mark Carney, because he's the man that's not even in the room, but keeps taking the
He's
space.
in the city, though. People have seen him.
But then comes afterwards that interview that Dominic LeBlanc gives, was saying that Mark Carney's not even is not in play anymore either. That he is going to be finance minister. Mark Carney, I don't know what happens to him.
Well, I hope you land the first interview with him, because Mark Carney has been
From
silent
your lips
about
to God's
his-
ears, or at least Mark Carney's.
Mark Carney's ears, because we don't know what he was offered. We don't know his view of what was being put. He and Kristy Freeland are quite good friends, so this would be
Godfather
an awkward
to one of
moment.
her children.
Yeah.
right?
Be an
Exactly.
awkward moment for him too. I wonder, when you talked about Justin Trudeau and what changes, Kristy Freeland remains a member of cabinet, or a member of a caucus, and she is going to run again, she says. If he leaves, she would be, I think, one of the favored people to take over, even if it's just only on a temporary basis. It's a really interesting dynamic he's left himself, because a void gets filled by somebody if it's not you, and that's what's happening here.
Well, in fact, that's a bit of the narrative I've heard from a couple of Liberals on the side, saying, that the antagonist here is not Justin Trudeau. The antagonist in their narrative is Kristy Freeland, who put together a letter and released it publicly and made sure it did maximum damage. So it's not like all Liberals are enamored with Kristy Freeland right now at the same time, because different circumstance, different tenure and time served. But she is amongst Liberals that are still very upset with Jody Wilson-Raybould, being compared to Jody Wilson-Raybould and what she did to the government earlier on.
But some people are saying, if you had so many problems with all the spending that was being done, which you mentioned in your letter, and we should have kept our powder dry, why did you spend so much money? Paraphrasing her, like, why didn't you complain about it before? I mean, she carried the water for quite a while, and I know, of course, he's trying to push her out of the job, so that was her light bulb moment. But anyway, we can get into this, but there's also lots of talk about perhaps appointing someone in caucus, right? You hear Eddie Goldenberg speaking about that, and others.
And then having it confirmed by Liberal membership after the fact.
Yeah, I think that's fraught with danger. We had a very short turnaround from Stéphane Dion to Michael Ignatieff, and we know what happened there. Dion had led the party to the worst showing ever, and Ignatieff beat that. So you have to be careful what you wish for here in terms of temporary and then into a full leadership race. Time is not their friend right now. Obviously, there's not only the Jagmeet Singh threat, which I think needs to be taken seriously, finally, but also the fact that if we have an election campaign, whatever or whoever the new leader is, will have almost no time to establish their own reputation and their own priorities for a Liberal government that has to be different from the one they either were a member of or hope to lead.
And how do you do that, right?
Yeah, that's hard.
Oh, I was just going to say that for many months, and again, I am a political junkie through and through, but I think that in many ways the story has been on repeat. It has been Trudeau on the ropes, Pierre Poilievre on the rise, and what is Jagmeet Singh going to do when he, ripped up the supply and confidence agreement and then obviously continued to support the government. And I think this was the week where obviously that all came to boil, right? It was like the same narrative, and then all of a sudden this was a week of absolute disruption. And I wanted to point out on Freeland that it was months ago that the Globe and Mail was reporting, Bob Fife specifically was reporting about, concerns in the Prime Minister's office, about Chrystia Freeland,
That was back in July.
Yeah, and this whole idea of a fraying relationship, the whole idea of Mark Carney was floated then, and then we saw again that story come up last week. And it culminated in, again, sorry, I'm pumping the tires of my great colleagues, but Laura Stone, longtime political reporter, asked Chrystia Freeland at a press conference in Toronto. And it was quite a moment, because Freeland, she was kind of, she got emotional. And Laura had asked her, how can you allow for him to cut you out at the knees like this? And I think it kind of caught her breath. And she talked about how some of the young people behind her had gone to school with her kids. And I don't know, it was like between that moment and some, obviously the reflections over the course of the weekend, something clearly changed. But, it's not just that the Prime Minister, it's like, what was he thinking in this instance? But they already, very clearly were parlaying to Chrystia Freeland many months ago that that they did not see her favorably. So I think it was a culmination of, okay, so this is how this is going to go down. This is going to be anonymous sources to let me know that you don't like the job that I'm doing. And then, okay, that story kind of simmers down, and then it comes it comes up again right before the fall economic statement that this is, the Mark Carney idea is being floated again. Are you serious? Like what? At a professional level, it's also it's not just this moment. It's multiple different pieces that fit together in this puzzle. Where if you're Freeland, I think people can sometimes appreciate. Okay, well, I wouldn't want a boss to do that to me. Like, okay, well, you did all this work and you have to go out and sell this thing, and then we're gonna push you overboard on a human level.
Bill Morneau could have told her how to handle it.
To your point as well, the people who may not have wanted to step up, Kristy Freeland was loyal. Let's all agree on that. Right? Whether we can all debate whether her record will stand the test of time, but she was loyal, and she was basically tossed aside 3 days before she delivered a fall economic statement that we all now understand she didn't particularly agree with. So what's the message to anybody else who is in that cabinet or is being asked to join that cabinet? It's a really tough message to sell.
So loyal, she was deputy prime minister. And I was actually thinking about this because in the Chrétien days, as two strong personalities, and Jean Chrétien's prime minister, Paul Martin's finance minister, but his deputy prime minister was Sheila Copps. It was not Paul Martin. It was that was his trust factor. So if you trust someone so much that you're going to name them your deputy prime minister, and as you say, Chris, then reward her in this way. I want to pick up on a thread that you were talking about, because when I was looking at that report in the summer about the PMO distancing themselves from Kristy Freeland, once Donald Trump was elected, and then there was talk about creating this new minister for Canada-U.S. relations, I thought, okay, well then they're creating an out for Kristy Freeland to get out of finance. But then we now learn that yes, it would have been the title, but without portfolio, without budget, without staff.
We were going to give her the job of dealing with Donald Trump and didn't ask her to go to Mar-a-Lago with him. That, it's just, none of this makes a whole bunch of sense. Yes, Deputy Premier is a great title. It doesn't really mean anything in a brand context unless you have resources, unless you have authority. We have a Foreign Affairs Minister, a Global Affairs Department that was not going to be necessarily available to her. Same with international trade. I can see why she thought that was a demotion.
I mean, all hat, no cattle. How can she do the job with no staff, no deputy minister? And I guess I don't know if she asked a million questions on the Zoom call where she was moved, but obviously over the weekend, I guess that started to gel, right?
Yeah, well, and that again says a lot about the relationship. He didn't even bother seeing her face to face. He did it on his
but not
Zoom
only
call.
that, he had her out there on Friday making a big announcement, the one that you were talking about with Laura Stone asking the question, and maybe she knew at that point she was going to get moved, but about pension. She made a big financial announcement in Toronto. You'd think that he knows what he's going to do to her. Do you know what I mean? Like putting her out there to make a big financial announcement, which she did on Friday.
Let alone a fall economic statement.
Let alone, and what was the big problem with her? Because she didn't want to spend as much as he wanted to spend? Like, what is,
Well, and as I said, as we keep an eye on Rideau Hall right now, because obviously things are starting to get underway, about 13 minutes behind schedule. I don't know where they are right now, but we'll keep an eye on that. We're going to go to that very quickly. But as I said right off top, everything that happened on Monday has triggered rumors of resignation, prorogation, and now this cabinet shuffle that we're about to see right now. I'm going to ask our producer, should we jump in now into Rideau Hall? Is that what we're hearing?
Wendy Nixon.
Okay, just a bit of housekeeping apparently. So let's keep talking. But as I said, it's triggered a lot. But let's focus in on this cabinet shuffle now. We don't know how long they're going to be members of this cabinet, depending on what happens when the House gets back. And here they come now. So all the best laid plans. We're now going to Rideau Hall. But stay with us. We'll be back for more right after the swearing in of Prime Minister Trudeau's new cabinet.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I would now ask you to please rise, if you are able, for the arrival of the ministers designate, the Prime Minister and the Governor-General of Canada. Bonjour, je vous remercie d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je vous demande maintenant de vous lever, si vous le pouvez, pour l'arrivée des ministres désignés, du Premier ministre et de la Gouverneure générale du Canada. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. Mr. John Hannaford, the Clerk of the Privy Council, will now seek the Governor General's consent to proceed. Monsieur John Hannaford, greffier du Conseil privé, demandera maintenant à la gouverneure générale la permission de procéder.
Excellence, pouvons-nous procéder? Excellency,
With the Governor General's approval, we will now proceed with the swearing in of members of the 29th Canadian Ministry. Maintenant que la gouverneure générale a signifié son approbation, nous procéderons à la sermentation des membres du 29e Conseil des ministres canadiens. The ministers and minister-designate who are members of the King's Privy Council for Canada will please come forward to swear the oath of office. Les ministres et les ministres désignés qui sont membres du Conseil privé du roi pour Canada sont priés de s'avancer pour prêter leur serment d'office. L'honorable Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, President du Conseil du Trésor. The Honorable Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, President of the Treasury Board.
I do solemnly and sincerely promise that I will truly and faithfully, to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of the Treasury Board.
I, Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skills and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as President of the Treasury Board.
The Honourable David Joseph McGuinty, Minister of Public Safety. L'Honorable David Joseph McGuinty, Ministre de la Sécurité publique.
I, David Joseph McGuinty, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Public Safety. Moi, David Joseph McGuinty, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Sécurité publique.
The Honourable Indira Anita Anand, Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. L'Honorable Indira Anita Anand, Ministre des Transports et du Commerce intérieur.
I, Indira Anita Anand, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. Moi, Indira Anita Anand, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement, fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Transports et du Commerce intérieur.
L'honorable Stephen Garrett McKinnon, ministre de l'Emploi, du Développement de main-d'œuvre et du Travail. The Honorable Stephen Garrett McKinnon, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour.
Moi, Stephen Garrett McKinnon, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Emploi, du Développement de la main-d'œuvre et du Travail. I, Stephen Garrett McKinnon, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour.
The Honourable Gary Anandasangari, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, and Minister responsible for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. L'Honorable Gary Anandasangari, Ministre de la Relation Couronne Autochtone et d'Affaires du Nord et Ministre responsable de l'Agence canadienne de développement économique du Nord.
I, Gary Anandasangari, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs and Minister responsible for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. Moi, Gary Anandasangari, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement que mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement le pouvoir et m'exécuterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Relations couronnes autochtones et des Affaires du Nord et ministre responsable de l'Agence canadienne de développement économique du Nord.
The Honourable Ruby Sahota, Minister of Democratic Institutions and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. L'Honorable Ruby Sahota, Ministre des Institutions démocratiques et Ministre responsable de l'Agence fédérale du développement économique pour le Sud de l'Ontario.
I, Ruby Sahota, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Democratic Institutions and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency of Southern Ontario.
The remaining ministers designate will please come forward to take the oath of allegiance, the Privy Councillor's oath, and the oath of office. Les ministres désignés restants, priez de vous s'avancer pour prêter le serment d'allégeance, le serment des conseillers privés et le serment d'office. Rachel Bendayan, ministre des langues officielles et ministre associé de la sécurité publique. Rachel Bendayan, Minister of Official Languages and Associate Minister of Public Safety.
Moi, Rachel Bendayan, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté le roi Charles III, roi du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. I, Rachel Bendayan, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. Moi, Rachel Bendayan, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté le roi Charles III en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toute chose traitée, débattue et résolue en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité, ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à une fidèle et loyale serviteur de Sa Majesté. I, Rachel Bendayan, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will, in all things, to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated in Council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. Moi, Rachel Bendayan, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des langues officielles et ministre associé de la sécurité publique. And I, Rachel Bendayan, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Official Languages and Associate Minister of Public Safety.
Elisabeth Bière, ministre du Revenu national. Elisabeth Brière, Minister of National Revenue.
Moi, Elisabeth Brière, je déclare fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté le roi Charles III, roi du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. I, Elisabeth Brière, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. Moi, Elisabeth Brière, je déclare solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté, le roi Charles III, en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toute chose traitée, débattue et résolue en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me sera confié ou révélé en cette qualité, ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à un fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté. I, Elisabeth Brière, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty Privy Council for Canada. I will, in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. Moi, Elisabeth Brière, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du Revenu national. I, Elisabeth Brière, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of National Revenue. Thank you.
Terry Gordon Duguid, Minister of Sport and Minister responsible for Prairies Economic Development Canada. Terry Gordon Duguid, Ministre des Sports et Ministre responsable du Développement économique Canada pour les Prairies.
I, Terry Gordon Duguid, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. I, Terry Gordon Duguid, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. I, Terry Gordon Duguid, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Sport and Minister responsible for Prairies Economic Development Canada. Thank you. Thank you.
Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Ministre du Logement, de l'Infrastructure et des Collectivités.
I, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. I, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will, in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. I, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Housing, Infrastructure, and Communities.
Darren Fisher, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense. Darren Fisher, Ministre des Anciens Combattants et Ministre associé de la Défense nationale.
I, Darren Fisher, do declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. I, Darren Fisher, do solemnly and sincerely declare that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty, King Charles III, as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things, I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. I, Darren Fisher, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense. Thank you very much.
Joanne Thomson, Minister of Seniors. Joanne Thomson, Ministre des Aînés.
I, Joanne Thomson, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. I, Joanne Thomson, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly revealed or treated of in council. Generally and in all things, I shall do this as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. I, Joanne Thomson, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Seniors.
And now the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the Clerk of the Privy Council will now sign the oath books to formally witness the swearing-in of the ministers. Le gouverneur général, le Premier ministre et le greffier du Conseil privé apposeront maintenant leur signature sur les registres de serment pour attester officiellement la sermentation des ministres. Now please join me in congratulating all of the ministers. Félicitons les ministres. We thank you all for being with us today at the ceremony. Merci de votre participation à cette cérémonie ici aujourd'hui. Please rise for the departure of the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the Ministers. Veuillez vous lever pour le départ de la gouverneure générale, du Premier ministre et des ministres.
And there you have it, as the Governor General and the Prime Minister leave the room in Rideau Hall, where we have just witnessed 12 new ministers being sworn in, or reshuffled, I should also say. In some cases, some backbench names being elevated, among them Rachel Bendayan from Montreal. Elizabeth Briere now becomes Minister of National Revenue. Terry Duguid, Minister of Sport. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith from Toronto becoming Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Darren Fisher becoming Minister for Veterans Affairs, Associate Minister of National Defence. David McGuinty becoming Minister of Public Safety. And added to that, some shifting of chairs for those who were already members of Cabinet. Anita Anand coming to the very top of the list, staying on as Minister of Transport, now also taking on Internal Trade. Gary Anandasangri is now not only Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, but also the Minister for Northern Affairs and Minister responsible for the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. Steve McKinnon, we saw there, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor taking on a big role now, switching over to Treasury Board, becoming the President of Treasury Board, taking over from Anita Anand. So all of that taking place at Rideau Hall. And Andrew Thomson is at Rideau Hall right now. I don't know if he's ready to join us. I'll just wait for the control room to tell me. Okay, Andrew, let's go to you right now. So there you have it. The names, not surprising, as I was saying earlier on, we were getting a list of names building up as the morning came about. Walk us through what we're now waiting for there at Rideau Hall.
Right, Michael. So the ceremony is over. We are standing by. There is a microphone right behind us here where we are expecting groups of ministers to come out. We expect 3 groups of 4 each to come out, take some questions from reporters out here outside of Rideau Hall. We are not expecting, though, to hear from the Prime Minister. All signals are that he will not be appearing outside to take any questions. And, you know, it's interesting, Michael, because, you know, having been to many of these in the past, when new ministers come out and take questions, and the questions are about their new portfolios, well, we don't get a lot of answers because, to be fair, ministers will say, look, I've only been in the job for 5 minutes. The ink is barely dry. So we don't hear a lot about that. But of course, and you and the panel have been talking about this, all of the uncertainty swirling around this government and the Prime Minister, we are expecting those new ministers to be facing questions about the Prime Minister, about their support for the Prime Minister, and about why they decided to join Cabinet at this point, given everything that's been happening over the last week.
Okay, well, Andrew, we'll speak again as those news conferences get underway, but for now, Andrew Thomson at Rideau Hall, thank you. And we're now joined avec nous maintenant en studio, Geneviève Tellier.
In the studio now, Geneviève Tellier, political scientist at the University of Ottawa. Hello. I'd like to start with the following question. Are you surprised by the choices that Justin Trudeau's made today? Well, I think we are surprised. We didn't know what to expect with our messages in the choices. There's focus on proper regional representation. People who have left are being replaced by people from the same region. Marie-Claude Bibeau from Quebec, for example, she's being replaced by Ms. Briere. Despite that, there are some surprises. Newfoundland is represented, 2 ministers from Newfoundland, so perhaps the government feels that there has to be better representation from Newfoundland and Labrador. The minister from BC, who is now stepping down, is not being replaced by someone from BC. That's surprising. A couple of other surprisings. New faces. A bit of challenge as well to the Prime Minister. Nathan Erskine-Smith, for example, who has publicly often said that he didn't agree with the government's position. So perhaps Mr. Trudeau wants people around him who might challenge him a bit. That's not without out with the realms of possibility. And as you know, David McGuinty also, he's from Ottawa. He's been in politics for 25 years now. So finally, he's become a minister. He's more experienced. If you think about Stéphane Dion, and other people, Ralph Goodale, who have stood down. They had a lot of experience. Mr. Trudeau wants to replace that experience. That's why Mr. McGuinty has been chosen, I think.
Bring in some views as well, because Geneviève starts beginning with this redistribution, if you will, in terms of what we're looking at regionally, because you're noting the fact that there is a notable absence in this cabinet.
Yeah. There are only 4 ministers from west of Ontario, none from Alberta, none from Saskatchewan, which of course is to be expected. They don't have an MP there. But you're right, this is not a regionally balanced. It is still gender balanced, which is important. But Elizabeth Briere going from Sherbrooke as a rural minister to replace Marie-Claude Bibeau, who I think is running for mayor of Sherbrooke.
Right,
I think
yes,
that's her plan.
yes.
So there's a rub there. But yeah, Atlantic Canada has more members of this cabinet than does the West. And I don't think that bodes well for whatever this government might want to send to a message of like, we're listening to the West's concerns. Maybe they've just given up at this point. The overall message here is that we were looking to find people who could fill the spaces, because we know some people were apparently saying no, and we need to focus on the areas where we still have some residual strength, and that would be in the eastern part of the country.
Yeah, well, it really does set up the next battle, doesn't it? Because it looks like if you're not going to break into new territory, you're going to shore up where you think you can actually win some seats. What do you make of what we have seen here?
Well, I mean, you know, the fact that they lost Randy Boissonneau, for example, I think they only have 2 seats in Alberta, if I'm remembering right. So he's gone, so you can't put him in there. But the other person, I guess, is George Chahal,
who's been critical of the Prime Minister.
And he's been critical of the Prime Minister. So that leaves, yeah, it's a wasteland for them anyway, but that leaves that big gap. And you talking about the dearth of seats and so on in BC. To me, the most obvious but glaring thing is the fact that the Prime Minister isn't going to comment, which you talked about before. I don't think I've ever in my life seen a cabinet shuffle, now correct me if you mean,
I can't remember one,
where the Prime Minister doesn't come out and make a statement, answer questions, and especially if you contrast that with his 2015 and where they all walked up the driveway and it was sunny ways and so on. This is almost funereal.
Yeah. Although, to quote the Prime Minister, that was 2015. So
that's true.
But Geneviève, je veux aussi
Geneviève, I'd also like to ask you another question
Jagmeet Singh
on what Mr. Jagmeet Singh has written and what Yves-François Blanchet have written as well. What do you think about that? Well, not a surprise really, but now it's been formalized. The 2 opposition parties who could support the government have come out against supporting the government. Mr. Blanchet has pointed out what happens next. He intends to vote against everything. So his approach is very, very clear. That's Mr. Blanchet's letter we can see on the screen.
Well, and you know, to your point, and perhaps not surprising that these are coming out as they will, but you know, what really changes the equation here is Jagmeet Singh this morning saying we're finally going to vote against this government when this motion comes up. We talked about it a little bit before. Chris, talk to us about the political calculation that leaves the Prime Minister now.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, isn't it? The whole point of this cabinet shuffle was to tell Canadians we remain focused on the issues that are most important to you. We recognize the challenges, particularly coming in January 20th when Donald Trump becomes president. So I'm going to shuffle the cabinet and try to put people in who will really advance those issues. Nathaniel Erskine Smith has a housing background, his time when he ran for the Liberal leadership in Ontario. A bit of a maverick. He will be outspoken. How much time will he have? Dominique Leblanc and Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, Julie and I can debate this. I don't think either of them has a real financial or economic background, but I do believe that Dominique Leblanc will be the lead on the Canada-US file. That's why he was in Mar-a-Lago instead of Chrystia Freeland. So I think that's part of it. But the difficulty now is the narrative has been stolen by Jagmeet Singh in particular. Not only is he prepared now to vote a non-confidence, he's prepared to actually introduce that motion. That's a significant difference of a political calculation. He is now preparing himself to be the Bob Rae in Ontario, bringing the government down instead of being able to support it.
Yeah, and again, I think that was part of the Liberal political calculation that the NDP would not want to jump into an election at this moment in time. But obviously that guarantee is taken out. Bob said, Chris said, how you said Bob Rae, that's why. So Chris,
we look a bit alike.
No, I adore you. So Chris was talking about how, the question of how much time is left here. And that is certainly something that resonates with me as I'm watching this cabinet. These are ministers that are not going to be able to create programs and sell those programs, and it becomes part of their legacy. This really is a caretaker cabinet, however long they're actually going to be in place.
And I have to say, I'm kind of pitying them having to come out and answer questions by reporters, because Trudeau is not coming out today, and a lot of the questions, I would venture to guess, are going to be about the future of this government. That's an uncomfortable position to be put in. We saw, obviously, there were, again, backbenchers that were elevated to roles that, they look very happy today, emotional even, but it's going to be for a very short period of time, and it's at a very uncomfortable period where, as Jagmeet Singh says in his letter, whoever is, I'm paraphrasing here, whoever's leading the Liberal Party, this government's time is up. And I think, if you're Justin Trudeau, you're, hopefully looking around saying,
and
okay.
here's Jagmeet Singh's out of there,
Yeah, like we're circling the drain here really at this point, and that's the part where, ultimately, I think there's two choices, call an election or a leadership race.
Yeah.
That's...
Although it seems that you can't really do a leadership race without prorogation. Because if they try to do a leadership race, that the House gets together again at the end of January, the House will fall before that decision is
Not
made.
only that, but everyone's got to take out their Liberal Constitution, which I have not had a chance to
I
take.
did.
But I think
Section 44 on candidates and leaders.
When the leader says, I'm leaving, doesn't a 28-day period kick in before you can call a race?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Obviously, I'm not an expert on the Liberal Constitution. I did go over the Liberal Constitution.
But no, I have another option, is that you prorogue and then you come back with a speech of the throne, which is your political platform, and you call an election. You say that will be the election opportunity.
But that would still mean Justin Trudeau is leading the Liberal Party in that scenario.
That would be the case. But you could say, well, I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving like the early January. I will leave later on to have the party prepare something.
So he would do the election under your scenario.
Yes,
he would lead into the election.
So that's one scenario. I'm not saying that this is the most likely, but it would be the opportunity is that with the speech of the throne, you have your political platform, and then you say to Canadians, this is what I want to.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. Looking at the calculations again that Justin Trudeau and his team need to make. Is he better off leading the party into the next election with having trailed in the polls for 6 months? And we all know that one of the key reasons people are unhappy is because of Justin Trudeau himself. Or do you kick it over to somebody else who also has a real hill to climb with no time to establish their own agenda, distinct from what has been done by Justin Trudeau? And do you say, as opposed to maybe going to 40 seats, do you keep it at 80? But either way, it's a huge lift.
Well, I was just going to say that, people can analyze this, and of course will analyze this, but there was a suspicion that maybe Justin Trudeau might bow out some time ago, like even in July of 2023 when he did the massive shakeup of cabinet, and he was asked repeatedly, essentially, what does this change? And there was an element of him not necessarily really, it was one of those like. He didn't see himself as the problem. It was, we're going to blow up the cabinet. And by the way, again, that cabinet shuffle, there was a lot that flowed from that, right? We saw Carolyn Bennett leaving cabinet, which ultimately propelled the by-election and then the subsequent result, the loss, significant loss in Toronto St. Paul's. There was David Lametti getting shuffled out of cabinet. Then we saw what happened with the Montreal by-election. And that shakeup didn't, it didn't change things. And leading into that cabinet shuffle, it had been a particularly challenging period for Trudeau because of, the allegations on election interference. And there were, it still wasn't a good time then, polling wise. And we have, only really seen things go down since then. So that's the part to pick up on Chris's point. If there is a leadership race, there is this limited time frame, and if he had pulled the plug sooner, then that would have maybe afforded those in the Liberal Party to maybe consider putting their, I'm not saying it necessarily would have changed any outcome, but it would have given them more time to establish their brand, to think about this happens everywhere. Succession plan, people eventually do leave jobs, especially after nearly a decade,
well,
right?
That makes me think of the Liberal convention that was here in Ottawa, right? Because you say that it would have given others a chance. Well, we know that there was in the back rooms people making their moves. Anita Anand, for example, François-Philippe Champagne as another example. And in that convention, the Prime Minister making the move to shut that down very quickly, say I'm not going. That was because you were there with me. It was this very clear message that for any of you who are thinking of succeeding me, now's not the time.
Right, and he has been trying to shut it down all the way along, and people like Dominique Leblanc, who probably, he wanted to run back when Michael Ignatieff.
Yes, he did.
So he's wanted to run for a long time. But you don't have to go that far back in history. I guess it's probably, decades, 30 years, whatever. But when Brian Mulroney left in February '93, he didn't give Kim Campbell that much time to sort herself out. She had the leadership, I think, in June. Against Jean Charest. And went down to 2 seats. That's what they went down to. Now, I think I've heard...
Although they were leading in the polls going into that campaign.
They were leading in the polls, but I think I've heard Mulroney over the years, or somebody suggesting, that he may have done better. And maybe that's what Trudeau is thinking. If I hang on here, if I turn it over to somebody else, they're all going to get... I think I can do better than them with my party.
Can I draw a significant difference, though? Sure. Brian Mulroney was loved by his caucus. He made an effort to talk to them. He brought them in. He asked about their families. He knew their children's names. This is not the same kind of Prime Minister with Justin Trudeau. This is a badly divided government. You can see that. In the work that I do now, we talk about the importance of body language. Anita Anand, today, as she took the oath, that was not a happy, I'm here look, or I'm grateful to the Prime Minister. And she, I think, reflects what a lot of people are feeling right now in that caucus, which is, you have left us in a mess. You need to go, and we're still trying to figure out what your plans are.
Yeah, well, you were talking about uncomfortable moments in front of that microphone. Arguably, one of the most uncomfortable moments will be for Anita Anand, right? Like the cabinet shuffle before here, she loses defense where she was performing very well in, goes into Treasury Board. She was obviously visibly upset because in that moment you saw Chrystia Freeland putting her arm around her, trying to buck up. It's great, it's going to be wonderful, and she was obviously not convinced. Not much of a poker player at that level.
She heard it over Zoom too.
Well, popular platform.
She just didn't write a letter. Just didn't write a letter.
But it will be this uncomfortable moment, I would think, for her, because to Chris's point, the body language was very clear. She's not happy that this has happened to her.
Exactly.
So.
And if you're part of the cabinet, again, you're the ones having to come out and to face those questions instead of, the leader, the Prime Minister, being the one to take the questions, take the heat, because it's not about any of them. This story is about the Prime Minister. What's going to happen? Are you going to call it quits? And frankly, I think it is important to point out the fact that the Liberals did not adopt the Reform Act, and that removed a key mechanism, to see a leader be told in a secret vote to pack up and leave. We saw Erin O'Toole obviously had to face that music, right? And so that's, I think the big thing is, like, what, other than a public shaming exercise, which frankly that's this week, what is the mechanism by which he can be pushed overboard?
When they got rid of Tom Mulcair, I'm just trying to remember, did they have this?
Yes, they did, because they had a vote at convention in Edmonton, and I was at that convention, and it was literally, so there was a built-in mechanism where he had to have a leadership vote.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
I'm going to get you to hold on that for a second. Let's just quickly look at what's happening at Rideau Hall right now. As you can see, the door is closed. Let's just take that full frame, if you will, in the control room. Thank you for that. So you can see the door now. We will, as we heard from Andrew, groups of 3 or 4 will be coming out to address. There's about 12 new ministers, so we are going to go there as soon as it begins. And to that, I can say that we're getting a bit of the order here. Anita Anand, we're talking about Anita Anand. She will be part of Group 1, along with Petitpas-Taylor, Duguid, and Fisher. That'll be the first grouping that comes out. I also want to read here, as we heard Jagmeet Singh today saying that he is now going to introduce a motion, vote this government out. moving the goalposts substantially for the NDP and Liberal calculations. Here now is what we're hearing from Pierre Poilievre, of course, leader of the opposition, Conservative leader. This is actually not in response to the cabinet shuffle, but to Mr. Jagmeet Singh. He says the following to Jagmeet Singh: Now that Parliament is closed and there is no chance to introduce any motion for months until after you get your pension. You did the same stunt in September, claiming you'd no longer prop Trudeau up. Then you went back on your word and voted 8 times against an election and for your boss, Trudeau. Just 11 days ago, you voted against a non-confidence motion filled with your own words. Had you voted the other way, we'd be almost halfway through the election now. So that is the response to Pierre Poilievre, to Jagmeet Singh finally making the decision that he will vote against the Prime Minister. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm not surprised in the least that it's filled with invective. That's the style that Pierre Poilievre has. But look, I mean, this is about just, let me back up a second. Pierre Poilievre can wish for an election all he wants. He doesn't have the votes for it, he's not going to get it. Jagmeet Singh controls that right now, and he's using that to his advantage on a day when the Prime Minister was trying to send out one message of stability. Now we have this underlying theme that there's going to be a vote, potentially non-confidence vote, early in probably February. I think it's the first time they have a supply day, and it's under Jagmeet Singh's terms. So more power to Jagmeet Singh for actually using his own timing as opposed to letting Pierre Poilievre dictate it to him.
I don't get it at all, because the House comes back January 27th. Jagmeet Singh's pension runs out February 28th or something. I mean, I can find it in a second. But the point is, between January 27th and when his pension runs out, I think there's going to be opportunities to bring down the government.
Yeah, there should be. And of course, you know, you're right. Like the balance of power right now is with the NDP, because the Liberals have been using them as a calculation that they don't want to go to a vote, so we can continue to govern. If not de facto, not de jure, de facto we'll continue to govern. But obviously there's also tension here from François Blanchet to get an election going. And when you look at the polling numbers in Quebec, there's obvious advantage for him, because we're now looking at a scenario where there will be, it looks like, a number of vote splits that should benefit the Bloc Québécois.
Yes, they could even, some polls are saying suggesting that they could be the official opposition, like in '93 for a few months. So polls are going well, and they have been going well for many months. So that's the good news for the Bloc, because at the time we were thinking, okay, Conservative will get some momentum. It is what we're seeing elsewhere in Canada, but that did not occur. And so in Quebec, the Bloc is very strong, and he outperformed Conservative, Liberals, NDP. I don't think they will have even one seat. They have one now, and so for.
I don't think the East will survive.
No, I don't think so. And as always, the sooner the better, because you never know what could happen. And so for the Bloc, the momentum is now. So it's good for the Conservative, it's good for the Bloc, and I think also Conservative and Bloc could, up to a point, work together about government being more decentralized. That's something that could appeal for Quebecers and for the Bloc. So it will be a new dynamic. And imagine if the Conservative are a majority government, would you have the Bloc Québécois, the opposition party, for 4 years? That would be a long period.
And a potential Parti Québécois government in Quebec,
that
right?
Also,
in 2 years from now.
And not only that, there's so much antagonism between the Bloc leader, Yves-François Blanchet, and Pierre Poilievre. I mean, Blanchet really cannot hide his disdain for Poilievre. He expresses it every day.
But at the same time, I don't know if you recall Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau at the beginning. It was the same at the same level, and so now they are buddies. So in politics, it changed.
Sometimes things change.
You know, although if and we were talking about this off camera, if we're looking at the Bloc Québécois official opposition and the Parti Québécois assuming provincial government, then we're also looking at the possible scenario of a referendum where Pierre Poilievre, a majority government, would have to be defending Canada in Quebec.
Yes, yes, and so is he prepared for that?
Which is not. I mean, he only has what, 10 seats in Quebec right now.
Yes, exactly. He would have almost no presence in Quebec, and what he does is around Quebec City, right, in the Saguenay. So it could be a very difficult challenge for him. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
We are.
But that's where we're left.
That's only because they haven't come out and started talking yet.
No.
But we're thinking big thoughts.
But it actually makes sense, because we haven't heard from the Prime Minister. We don't know what his plans are.
Yeah.
So he's left open the door for us to talk about what the future might look like. And after all, this whole shuffle was about the future.
Right.
And unless he speaks and talks to us about what that looks like, we have time to fill.
Yeah. He must know that vacuums get filled. So.
No. But when you talk, we haven't heard a lot from the Prime Minister. Interestingly enough, after Monday, there were two opportunities where the Prime Minister did address Liberals, at least, because there was the Laurier Club, Liberal fundraisers, the big donors, Liberal Party. He had a little speech there, not very long, after a very rough day. And then it follows the holiday party for the Liberal caucus. And what struck me was just how little he had to say. It was almost like he was living in a different era, not really acknowledging what has happened, which is, potentially cataclysmic, what has happened this week.
And not only that, he not only did not acknowledge the situation at the Christmas party, but he never said a thing about his deputy prime minister. He never acknowledged the fact that he's just had his biggest hit since he's been in government. So, I mean, people that were at that party said, we're a big family, we had a good time and everything else. But that did happen Monday. And like you say, today is Friday, and it's a huge issue, and he said nothing.
And at the Christmas party, his line was about, around the holidays, families, have arguments, again, paraphrasing, and, like all families, hopefully we'll work through them. And it was just one of those, again, moments where I think there are people within even the Liberal Party that are saying, like, this is a bit out of touch. This isn't just, again, this isn't just a spat, a small little thing. We're going to work through it. This is major. A bomb just went off, really, in cabinet. The deputy prime minister, on the day of the fall economic statement, boom, in a letter, and not just any letter. I'll be honest with you. When I was reading the letter in real time, I'd love to hear people were thinking, because it's like, is this real? Yeah. Like it was so, former journalist, like it was just boom, to the point. And she really hit it off the top and was, very critical of the government's approach and made that known. So it's not just a little squabble. I think that you can, put the Band-Aids on at Christmas and everyone puts on a happy face. Yeah. To what Chris was observing there, it doesn't seem as though, other key members of cabinet like Anita Anand are, putting on that happy face and thinking like we're all going to be a big happy family. I just Rob Oliphant again is like, you're my friend and everything, but please go. Like, Well, but that is, it seemed like a feeble attempt to use an old charm offensive in a very different situation, right? So.
Well, for me, because there was that portion of the speech, but after that we had the sense it was on the electoral trail, and so those are my big ideas. Don't forget what I have done, what I want to do, and I thought it was like going through a job interview. So he was like showing, well, I want to stay there, and here is what I could do, and I will show you I will be like that in an electoral campaign. And now I know it's up to you to make up your mind. But that was Tuesday. I mean, since then there was many things happened, and so I don't think we are really now still at that point.
I always find it interesting because as long as Trudeau has and this government has been in power, Trudeau has openly kind of talked to people about the fact that he has.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Let's go to Rideau Hall right now because the first group is out. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor right now at the microphone. Let's take a listen.
I first of all simply want to take a moment to congratulate all of my colleagues. We're excited to move forward for working for Canadians and looking forward to your questions. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Minister. So one question, no follow-up. I'm going to do about 5 to 6 minutes per group. If you could state your name and outlet, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ministers. Ashley Burke, CBC News. This is a question for all of you. There are a growing number of members of your caucus who no longer have confidence in the Prime Minister. By accepting these positions, you are confirming your support for him. To each of you, why do you think he deserves it?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Fisher, Member of Parliament for Dartmouth Cole Harbour and the Minister for Veterans Affairs. I would say I'm so proud to serve with all of my colleagues in the House of Commons on all parties. But what I would say is I would ask that at this time, this very critical juncture, that we all push in the same direction. We have issues left, issues right, and issues in front of us. It's important that we all ran to serve Canadians. And you will never have to ask me twice to serve Canadians. And it's time that we all get on the same track and work hard to solve the issues that are facing us in the near future.
And I'm simply going to say we're all here today because we absolutely support the Prime Minister, and I think we can't answer that question on behalf of folks that have already made comments. We are here today. We are united front, and again, we are truly looking forward to working for Canadians, and again, looking forward to working with my caucus colleagues and also all parties, because Canada is the best country in the world, and we have to ensure that we put our best foot forward in moving forward in wanting to work collaboratively with the U.S. Administration that's coming in very, very soon. And again, we're all excited to do the work that's ahead.
Well, once ago, I'd like to say that we're here today as members of the Cabinet. We support the Prime Minister wholeheartedly and will continue to work for Canadians over the next few months. We have to work on a relationship with the U.S. and we have to have a strong voice for Canada. And we have to ensure that we work in the best interests of Canada and its population.
For me, you know, I've been thinking a lot this week about the events of the week and have chatted with the Prime Minister a number of times. And I believe this is a moment where we need to stand united. We need to stand united in the face of a growing incoming American presidency, growing threat to our domestic economy, which is why I'm so pleased to be taking on the role of Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. We need to work together for the domestic economy and for our trade relationship with the United States. And if we don't all band in the same direction, the results are not going to be as strong as they otherwise would. And so I'm here today. I'm taking on an additional portfolio in internal trade because I believe that that is the way we will maintain and grow our domestic economy and our relationship with the United States. This is a time for unity. This is a time for us to stand together. And I look forward to the work I will be doing with the provinces and territories on interprovincial trade and commerce, because we need a Team Canada approach, not only vis-a-vis the United States, but in our own country. We need to grow our domestic economy, and we need to work together to do that.
Hi, I'm Terry Duguid, the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South, the new Minister of Sport, the new Minister of Prairies Economic Development Canada, and that is a mouthful. But I would just echo my colleagues, my amazing colleagues' message of unity. Important that we keep Canadians' concerns about affordability, about growing our economy front and center, and I'll be particularly focused on Prairie Canada, Western Canada, so important to the prosperity of our nation, 25% of the Canadian economy, and that will be my focus, working with some amazing colleagues.
Bonjour, Julien Lapointe de
Julien Lapointe, Radio-Canada. How will you convince skeptical Liberals that this government can still accomplish something, given that it could fall in January, as early as January, in fact? I'll start. We are a minority government and have been for the past 3 years. We've worked very, very hard in cooperation with all parties in the House, but our focus continues to be Canadians, of course. When I'm in Moncton, in my beautiful region, people want to know what their government's doing for them. And that's what we have to continue to do. We have to continue to work to support Canadians across the country. So with me and my colleagues, our focus will be to work together to ensure that we'll always have our focus on the well-being of Canada. That's what we'll continue to do. I'd just like to add also that we were successful in this last Parliament. We were able to get some very important initiatives through Parliament, pharmacare, and other measures of that type for affordable housing, for children, for families, and for seniors as well. We saw that success and will continue to work for Canadians. That's our responsibility. It's our objective as well.
This will be the last question for this group. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Catherine with the Ottawa Citizen. My question is for Minister Petitpas-Taylor. I'm wondering if you can share, what are your priorities in the role given the potentially limited amount of time that you have? And, do you plan to continue to build on the work that's been done by the previous minister, including with the Refocusing Spending Initiative? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the amazing Minister Anand for the work that she's done as the President of the Treasury Board. And I certainly, for the next few weeks ahead, it's really going to be getting briefed up on the file as well. But again, the department has been left in very good hands with Minister Anand, and I'm going to continue to do the work that has been planned out. Again, there's certainly a lot of priorities for our government, and we are going to be hard at work. Starting this afternoon, we have our first cabinet meeting at 3 o'clock, I believe. So it's time to roll up our sleeves again, and I think we're all very excited to take on these new responsibilities. We have some that are maintaining with their traditional responsibilities, and many of us are adding on or being here for the first time. So again, we're just really excited and rolling up our sleeves and just really wanted to get to work for Canadians.
I might just add something to that. The incoming president of the Treasury Board has been a member of the Treasury Board with us and has therefore been at the table for those key policy discussions, not only on refocused government spending, but on all the measures that have been passed by Cabinet and must be reviewed by Treasury Board in order to ensure accountability and fiscal prudence before they leave the Government of Canada. So Minister Petitpas-Taylor, the new president of the Treasury Board, is very, very well placed to take on this responsibility, and I look forward to supporting her and working with her as she makes this important transition.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
So the first group there, amongst them Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor as well as Nita Anand. Let's bring in Andrew Thomson right now. Andrew, as you prepared us, they are coming out in groups right now. So my one question, no follow-up because that's all I'm allowed, to you is what else will we be watching for in the next little while?
Okay, Michael. Well, the first four are back in, and we are now looking for the next group of four. So here's who you can expect to see come out any moment from now. We'll hear from Gary Nandasangari, who is Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and now also Minister responsible for Northern Affairs. We're going to hear from Nate Erskine-Smith, and it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say about his new role as Minister of Housing. Of course, he's been an outspoken member of caucus and did run for the Ontario Liberal leadership. He's the MP for Beaches, East York in Toronto, and so he is part of the second group coming out as well in just a moment. We're also going to hear from Rachel Bandayan from the Montreal riding of Outremont. She has been Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance, now Minister responsible for official languages and also an Associate Minister of Public Safety. And finally, in this next group will be Joanne Thompson from St. John's East in Newfoundland and Labrador. She's now the Minister responsible for seniors, Michael.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for that. So that's the second grouping that we'll be watching out for. That is our Andrew Thomson at Rideau Hall. Let's continue the conversation here again as we, I'm going to ask our control room to keep the image of that door for us, though, so we can jump back to Rideau Hall once the next grouping comes out. But Geneviève, we were talking a bit about it, Rachel Bandayan being chosen for official languages. Does that surprise you?
Yes, it does. Normally, you have some francophone out of Quebec because the realities are very different. And if you're talking about minority, linguistic minority, the problem, the issue are more important outside Quebec. So Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, I think she was well received by the community, the francophone community. There will be some disappointment, I think, towards that because they have now a new minister. They have to explain all the files now. So I don't mean that Madame Bandayan won't do a good job, but there's a learning curve, I think, that's going there. So I'm kind of surprised to see why it was changed. The rationale for me is not very clear.
Yeah, and to your point, the politics and the issues around the two official languages in Montreal and Quebec different than the challenges elsewhere outside of the province of Quebec.
If I could add something, now the issue about francophonie or Quebec is it's closely linked to Treasury Board. So the ball is now in the hands of Treasury Board. So it would have made sense to to have Madame Petitpas-Taylor to keep that file and push some issues that are kind of a frustration for many Francophones outside Quebec. And so, again, my surprise for that.
Yeah, surprise on that. You know, I also want to talk about Anita Anand, because we were noting the fact how difficult this moment was for her, because when she went in there, and we were talking about it off camera because we were watching it in real time, the Prime Minister trying to make eye contact with her with a smile on his face, she not really giving eye contact back, visibly upset. As I said, Anita Anand, not the best poker face when it comes to when she is upset. But she handled that question, I think, rather well. When asked as to why you're still staying in the cabinet, you know, she says, now is the time to be together. What do you make of that, Kristy?
Yeah, I think she was extremely careful in the words that she chose. She was talking right off the bat about reflecting on the events of the week, and you know, people will recall how she was really caught off guard when she learned about Chrystia Freeland resigning from cabinet. She made some brief remarks to reporters at that time. She seemed quite shaken, and she essentially said that she wasn't going to comment further. She was, you know, going to process it and kind of collect herself. So this is kind of the key moment now that we're hearing from her again about the threat of what's to come with the incoming U.S. president. Yes, thank you. U.S. presidency, Donald Trump, and the inauguration that will happen in January. And again, this need to stay united. That again could form the basis of leadership, that in these times of crisis, really. And I think there are experts who believe that Donald Trump presidency is it's a 5-alarm fire for Canada, and what this will mean, especially for tariffs, the threat of tariffs, the Canadian economy. So I think, yeah, she chose her words very carefully. She was not fawning over the Prime Minister. She was kind of talking about this being such a serious moment, and that's why it's important to stick together.
One thing we didn't hear from her, though, is that I support the Prime Minister, right? What we heard from her is the importance of generating more trade within Canada. Heard about the priorities she brought forth, and clearly the talking points that they have all been given are that we need to talk about unity, about the job ahead. I think every one of these groups is going to get some variation of the same question about, by accepting this role, do you have support? Are you saying that you're supporting the Prime Minister? So I was struck by that. She's still, again, someone who helps people deal with public appearances. Her body language, her face, her emotions are not someone who's thrilled to be out there. I'm reading into it just by watching her, and I think that's how most Canadians would view it.
And I gather she's absorbed whatever shock she had earlier in the week when you saw her going into, I guess it was caucus, you were just talking about it, and she looked very ébranlée, the word in French, like shaken by the whole thing.
Because the letter from Chrystia Freeland came out the same time caucus was getting underway on the Hill.
But she's been moved from a big portfolio, right? We talked about it from defense when it went to Bill Blair. So she's obviously decided to take the high road, no matter what. I mean, the only person that really was, flowery with their language, I guess that you could say, was Ginette Petitpas-Taylor about the Prime Minister. Well, not even flowery. We stand united with the Prime Minister. We all support him. I didn't see anybody going, right on. I didn't see that. But, and they didn't pick up that theme. And that is the theme of the day. He's in trouble. The dissidents are everywhere. There's probably more popping up, as Sean Casey from Charlottetown said. Watch to see if more come out after the shuffle. I don't know. Maybe there are. Maybe there aren't. But the point is, outside the moat, like there's crocodiles everywhere, and they're not talking about that issue. The fact that the Prime Minister is under fire right now, they're not touching it. I mean, Darren Fisher, the new guy, I mean, he said, he just ignored the whole elephant in the room thing. They asked him, like, what are you doing here? What do you think of the Prime Minister? Not going there. Time to unite. He used the talking points.
Yeah, we're all elected to serve Canadians.
So they've decided how they're going to handle it. She took the high road. She's got an interesting portfolio with trade because of the tariffs that could come down. You hear a lot of people saying we have to bolster interprovincial trade has been an issue for like 35 years, right? So she might be able to, in her head, say, I'm going to do this meaty thing and make it work, and the rest, I'm going to put it over here.
Yeah. Well, listening to her, for me, there was a clear sense of duty, a sense of duty that she has, that she's going to try to carry something forward despite what is happening around her. Jean-Philippe, what did you make of it?
I'm surprised by her portfolio, which is international trade, which probably is a good addition. Internal trade, which is a good idea. But where is the international trade with Donald Trump? I mean, that was a big drama. That was what Chrystia Freeland did not like, and she left. And we have no one that has this responsibility in cabinet. So for me, that is really striking about who's taking the lead on that. Probably Mélanie Joly as a foreign minister.
I mean, Dominic LeBlanc said yesterday, I'm going to, I mean, that's just about the border, not necessarily. He said, I'm going to be having meetings with the Trump's border czar, you know, over Christmas to show him this and that. So maybe, I mean, he hasn't finished tying all up the loose ends on that. But in terms of who's going to negotiate.
Well, Mary Ng is the Minister of International Trade, but you have to think that Dominic LeBlanc, by having been invited to Mar-a-Lago along with the Prime Minister, that he is going to be front and center. After all, Donald Trump is a very tough negotiator, is a transactional person. You need someone who doesn't take offense, who will actually focus on the actions versus the words, and continue to make the case that Canada is not only a partner domestically or economically, but a partner in security. That's the new motif, right? You have to be able to say security is a priority for us. So, you know, the new public safety minister, David McGuinty, I think he is the kind of serious journalist that we've seen over the, or sorry, serious politician we've seen over the years. He won't be flustered by that. He's had 20-something years in Parliament. He's head the NCI COP committee, which looks at security issues. So I think the two of them will be the ones we see mostly on that file.
Yeah. Right, because a lot of people said Chrystia Freeland was a tough negotiator. That's why he doesn't like her. That's why he calls her toxic, and they booted her out. So
yeah, well, speaking of Chrystia Freeland, I you know, of course, earlier on there was the monarch or the minister of everything, and that seems to be what Dominic LeBlanc is now evolving to. Babysitter to the Prime Minister in the past, now Minister of everything, right? So it seems to be what we're seeing from Dominic LeBlanc. But and as we, you know, it'll be interesting to see how others are going to ask that same answer that same question, because without a doubt that is still, regardless of these elevations and the changing of the spot, I think Anita Anand was probably again the more interesting one we're waiting to hear from. For the rest, it will be that question about the Prime Minister and the future of the party, unless you can think of something else.
The terrible thing about it, if you're the government, is that this is really a huge challenge. Dealing with Donald Trump, dealing with the prospect of tariffs that could have a damaging impact, significantly damaging impact on this country, being able to build out new trade relationships, being able to work effectively with Donald Trump becomes a huge issue. And I just, without Chrystia Freeland, who had that previous experience, we don't know why. Our Prime Minister felt she was no longer up to that job, or that she could be removed from finance and given that total responsibility with no, as we said earlier, no staff, no department, no deputy minister, nobody to support her.
Yeah. Does that become the ballot box question, though? Because I've been wondering this, how so much has happened, not because Donald Trump introduced a policy, but because he put out a social media post, right?
And is what the ballot box
the dealing with Donald Trump.
Yes,
you know,
who is the Trump horse whisperer?
Well, exactly.
If it's Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, that becomes the ballot box question.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's
they
true.
are tied. But look at the letter of Chrystia Freeland. She talks about that. For me, the letter is the starting of her leadership campaign. So we have the match plan. Look at Anita Anand. She talked about Team Canada and talking with provincial premier to come up with a strategy. So she's already on the campaign. Will she succeed? That's another question. So yes, that will be the ballot box for me. That's quite sure, and that's why it is a game changer this week comparing to in October when his leadership, Trudeau's leadership, was contested. At the time, we did not have this prospect of maybe a bit, but not those tariff of 25%. And so it was very, very different. And so now the issue are completely different.
Yeah, I think in the campaign, you know, Donald Trump was talking about a 10% tariff on all international goods going to the United States. But when it becomes this directed to Canada, 25% against you, 25% against Mexico, the narrative and the discussion certainly changes. You know, can we talk a little bit about that? You know, I take what you're saying. If Justin Trudeau remains leader, ultimately what we're going to have is not so much an election, but a referendum on Justin Trudeau. And when I think about that, I think about the referendum on the Charlottetown Accord. Right. You know, it was less about the Charlottetown Accord and more about, do you trust Brian Mulroney to negotiate the Constitution.
People are motivated by pocketbook issues. Are their lives better today? Do they feel their children's future is more secure after 10 years of this Liberal government led by this Prime Minister? I think the answer for most people right now is no. Housing prices are huge. Grocery prices remain an issue, whatever the inflation might have contributed to that, and uncertainty in Ukraine and all of those things. So ultimately, the guy who has to wear that will be the man who potentially is campaigning again for a 4th term in office. So he becomes the issue with that backdrop.
And Pierre Poilievre has been so successful in blaming him for everything.
In 3 words.
Right.
Axe attacks,
Yeah,
build the homes.
Yeah.
Right, but about housing, about drugs, about the fact your kid's still in the basement. I mean, he blames him for absolutely everything, and it's worked. He's 25 points ahead now in the latest poll.
Because his team knows how to build the infrastructure, if you will, to try and, I mean, again, people like Jenny Byrne, who are, deeply experienced political strategists, and so they know about message discipline. They know about, that campaigns also involve trying to, get volunteers in and go out. And, we've seen Melissa Lantsman, for example, like really, going out in Ontario and trying to, shore up support and kind of almost, touring around, right? Like they have been at this for a very long time. So there's that interplay, right? Of yes, Trudeau's on the ropes for a number of reasons, but Pierre Poilievre and his team, meantime, again, are, they know the work that is involved in order to kind of build that path to try and win that majority. And I was just going to say before the ministers came out that, Justin Trudeau would openly talk about how he was the chief salesperson, right? Like his staff would talk about how, like, the Prime Minister was actually given time to sleep because he was, this is actually something I heard in traveling with him over many years, that, it was like, okay, well, we actually make sure that he can sleep because his currency is to go out and to, kiss babies and talk to people. And
he's your amp man.
Yeah.
He's to bring
and
it up.
now it's like, that salesperson has now become, according to some, a great liability. And that's the turn, right? Here we go.
You've got the magic touch. As Kristy speaks, the new ministers come out. Let's take a listen. Rachel Van Duyen.
Des tirs sur une école primaire à Toronto. Alors, there were some shots in Toronto earlier this week. It was against a primary school. There was also a synagogue in Montreal and some fires. Actually, we have to fight heinous crimes since 2019. It has more than doubled, I would say. So they're targeting the Muslim community. They're targeting also the Jewish community. It has more than tripled. It has been over the same period of time. Think about 2022, 2023. The numbers of crime against Jewish, it's an increase of 71%. The highest never ever seen. In my own riding, I think we had more than one incident. We have shots against schools. Their primary school, by the way, Jewish primary schools, it was not once, twice, but 3 times. And like I said earlier in Montreal, a synagogue was targeted. And with the news this morning, I was able to talk to our Commissioner Dusen, the RCMP. We talked about what happened in Toronto, what will be the next step. And what I want to announce today is that we will have a forum tackling the anti-Semitism issue. We have to talk to our partners, our allies. We have to discuss this within the provinces and territories, but we also have to talk about that with municipalities and different authorities. We have to be together to fight these heinous crimes. Briefly make an opening statement regarding, in particular, the gunshots fired very early this morning in Toronto on an elementary school. An elementary school located on Shepherd Avenue. This was a Jewish school. Earlier this week,
Just 48 hours ago, a firebomb was launched at a synagogue in Montreal. I think everybody is aware that crime, hate-motivated crime in particular, is on the rise. Since 2019, police reported that hate crimes have more than doubled. A significant increase in hate crimes committed against the Muslim community, and strikingly, anti-Semitic hate crimes have almost tripled in that same time period. Although the Jewish community represents only 1% of the Canadian population, they are the number one community that is targeted by hate crimes, a 71% increase in the number of hate crimes against the Jewish community. As a result, and in order to ensure that we stem this violence, I will be convening, along with the Minister of Justice, our counterparts provincially and territorially, also municipally, as well as police authorities. As you all know, the police of jurisdiction are the ones that are responsible for investigating, but I took the opportunity here today to speak to Commissioner Duhem of the RCMP, who is in touch with the Toronto Police, and we are going to be working all together in order to address this heinous and intolerable rise in hate crimes in Canada. We're now happy to take your questions.
Good morning. Antoine Trepanier from the National Post. My question is for Mr. Erskine Smith. Pardon me. You said that you weren't seeking re-election in the upcoming election, and you seem to have put some thoughts before accepting this new job. Why did you accept the job, and are you running in the next election?
I had decided about a year ago, I guess, that I wasn't going to run. After conversations with my family, I got 2 young kids. It's actually my soon-to-be 5-year-old's birthday party later today, and this morning at 5 a.m. I was stuffing a creeper piñata with candy. So it's been a day. You know, it was a tough leadership race last year, and that balance wasn't right. That balance between, you know, sacrifice, but also that ability to make a difference. And is the sacrifice justified by virtue of the difference that you're able to make? And that balance wasn't there. And an opportunity came along where you can make an even bigger difference. Sean's a good friend, and he's done important work on housing. Housing, to me, is, outside of Canada-U.S. relations, the most important file for, you know, I see millions of Canadians who are rightly angry about housing, where they see their parents are better off than they are, even though they're working just as hard and have a job that's just as good. I see, you know, you look around, every one of our communities is affected by homelessness and encampments, and that's a consequence of housing. You look at productivity, and people want to talk about productivity in this country, and we should, and people are leaving my city, my province, and our country because they can't afford to live here. And so you know, look, I understand there's going to be a short runway. I'm not blind to that. But if I can make a small difference, if I can make a big difference, I want to make the biggest difference that I can. That's why I joined politics in the first place, left law for politics. And so, you know, it wasn't an easy decision by any means. And yeah, I consulted colleagues. I consulted my wife more than anything. And I plan to run the next election in order to protect the progress and really in the short term make the biggest difference that I can.
Good afternoon, Jillian Piper with Global News. This question is for all ministers. What assurances has the Prime Minister given you that he will be staying on as leader until the next election? Has he shared a plan?
What's clear is there's a lot of work to do to help Canadians and to ensure that Canada is prepared as a new administration takes shape in the U.S. As someone who's continued to serve as a minister, that is the singular focus that we have. Each one of us have individual portfolios. In my case, the work around the North is particularly important. Responsibilities to ensure that the Arctic sovereignty is intact, I think, is essential for Canada's long-term well-being, as well as North America's overall defense system. So I look forward to working with Mr. Blair and Jolie on that work. As a government, the Prime Minister has been very clear that our task is to ensure that we deliver for Canadians, whether it's the fall economic statement or to ensure the work on reconciliation, the work on housing, the work on public safety is something that we are tasked to do, and that's what we will be focusing on going forward.
In French as well, could someone say that in French for us, please? Of course I can. As new Minister of Official Languages, it's always a pleasure to answer in both official languages. I don't know if you want to answer the question in French, perhaps.
The question was answered. What assurances has the Prime Minister given you that he will stay on until the next election? That was the question. English and French, please.
Well, I think that politics is a choice, and the choices are often difficult ones. The Prime Minister has been clear with all of us as a caucus that there was a difficult choice to make. He has a choice to make. He has a decision, and it's a difficult one that he has to make. I've also made a choice, and as my colleague has just said, the choice I made was to serve my country. I've been asked to serve as a minister today. And the reason I got into politics was to help Canadians. And I've had that possibility, and I have it today as well. It's important also, if you look at Germany or France, for example, or other countries, there's political instability across the world. President Trump will be sworn in January. Therefore, it's important for us to be a stable country here in Canada. It's important to defend Canadians' interests. I don't intend to waste any time on partisan politics. I'm not thinking about elections, I'm thinking about Canadians.
As I was saying, politics is about choices. Very often, those are difficult choices. I think the Prime Minister was quite clear that he has a choice that he's reflecting on. I think each one of us, and certainly I'll speak for myself, I made a choice today, and the decision that I made is based on the intention that I always had, and that was to enter politics, not worrying about the next election or the partisan nature of this job, but in order to serve Canadians. And I have an incredible opportunity to help protect Canadian safety, and I will do that with every ounce of my being. I also, like all of my colleagues in Cabinet, have an opportunity to serve Canadians at a time of great instability around the world. Political instability exists in many of our peer countries at the moment. I think it was on Monday we saw what was going on in Germany, and a few weeks ago in France. The important thing is for Canadians to know that there is stability here in our country, particularly given that President-elect Trump will be sworn into office in a few short weeks in January.
This will be the last question. Dernière question pour ce groupe. Merci.
Lise Denis, Le Droit. Madame Bendayan.
Ms. Bendayan,
Ou non?
yes or no?
Est en déclin au Québec.
Is French in decline in Quebec? Well, Quebec has a very important role. It's mainly Francophone province, and the fact that Quebec is a Francophone province protects our linguistic duality here in Canada. My father is a Francophone, my mother's an Anglophone, so I've experienced that bilingualism since my birth, and I know how important it is as part of Canada's assets. But is it in decline, yes or no? A simple answer, please. Well, I think that my role as Minister of Official Languages is to ensure that we maintain bilingualism in this country, to make sure that the Anglophone minority in Quebec is protected, and that the minority Francophone outside Quebec is protected also, to ensure that bilingualism is protected across the country, and so that we're able to maintain our bilingual country that we're so proud of. You haven't answered our question.
That was the last question for this group. Thank you very much, ministers.
Thank you. Okay, so there you have it. We saw Minister Ananda Sangari, Bendayan, Erskine Smith, Thomson, although really the questions did not go to Minister Thomson. You know, Geneviève, I'll begin with you, because obviously there was a question that they were asking Rachel Bendayan to a yes or no answer. Instead, she she waxed more philosophically, if you will. Can you talk about what they are trying to get at with her there?
An acknowledgement of this, what we call it, asymmetry, linguistic asymmetry, meaning that the needs of the Francophone minority outside Quebec are probably bigger or more in peril, the future, than what the Anglophone in Quebec are facing. So this asymmetry, acknowledging that resources should be put more towards that Francophonie. And so they ask the question, are you aware of that? And do you acknowledge that there is a decline of the usage of French outside Quebec? Her answer kind of was disappointing because I think that Madame Petit-Pateleur before did acknowledge that. The position of this government is also towards acknowledging this asymmetry. And so I think that for this new Minister of Francophonie, the learning curve, as I said before, will be kind of step in the sense that she is not well aware of all the issue and subtlety, I would say, of that file. Now, how much time will she have? Is that an important issue? It is an important issue for the Liberal Party because the base, the Francophone outside Quebec, normally vote Liberal, and you have a few ridings important, especially in Ottawa, but not just in Ottawa, that could make a difference. So, as I said, I was a bit concerned. Surprised by that nomination, so we'll see what's the remaining of that. But yes, kind of a bizarre position, I would say, to start with.
Yeah, and very much a question for, I'm going to switch on to message tracking here because I don't advise other people, but it seems to me the message track is stability.
My God.
Donald Trump and coming together in unity, Chris.
Unity. Yeah, no, this is what you would expect on a verse day. Here are the things that you need to focus on because we understand that this cabinet shuffle is supposed to send a signal to Canadians that we are still in charge and we have control of our agenda. And the only way you can do that as a newcomer, knowing that your newcomers are going to be facing questions about the leadership of Justin Trudeau, is to repeat those relatively safe talking points. Like, no one's against unity. We all think that's a great idea. Everybody wants to focus on their portfolios. We get that too, and that's the safe ground. I was actually kind of surprised in this last group that didn't have a more senior minister like a Stephen McKinnon or even David McGuinty coming out and leaving it to Rachel Bendayan, who is still relatively new. To reinforce that message that we have the big picture in mind here. We are really aware of the challenges Canadians are facing. And
because so many of the answers are being answered, or questions are being answered the same way, there is this element of
political skating.
There we go.
I mean, what we saw there are each one of them skating, and their answers made no sense. The point is they're there for a short time. They're not even going to have time to order new letterhead or get calling cards. Again, they'll have chauffeurs and they'll forget their names in 3 weeks because they won't have much more than that, because as soon as they walk into the House of Commons and the opposition sees the whites of their eyes, they're going down. So for them to say, I took the job, I know the runway's not very long, but I want to make a difference. Go read a book. No, but seriously, there's just not enough time to make a difference. Yeah. So all of their answers don't have any veracity.
No, but you do want them to have a quotable quote. Do you want? I heard nothing here other than maybe from Nathaniel Erskine Smith that will make the news headlines, right? Yeah. Will that be the one that's quoted? I think I can make a difference even though the runway is short. He did address that. Yeah. That's the only usable clip, if I can put it that way, that journalists will have out of this today. Yeah.
For sure, because they're dealing with the short time frame. And very good question about, did the Prime Minister tell you, like, he's going to be leading you?
Any assurances that he will stay?
Yeah. Right, and this is the problem. I mean, they're taking on a job that is, everybody knows, is going to be so short. So how much of a difference can they make when you're going to be opening up your gifts next week and you don't go back into the House till January 27th? And like I say, as soon as they see you walk in the door, they're going to put, as soon as they can, a motion to get rid of you.
Yeah, a quick word for you, because I do have another question, but in terms of what we witnessed there.
Yeah, no, I think I said before ministers were going to come out that it was going to be awkward, and I think it is, right? It's not about their new portfolios, in large part anyway. It's really about this, it's not even an elephant in the room. It's, everyone is thinking about it, and it can't be a very comfortable situation, even for those who really dreamed of being in cabinet. This is maybe not exactly how they would have wanted, you know, to, like the McGuinty, for example, right? Like has been in politics a very long time. This is this key moment.
Finally a bride, not just a bridesmaid, but very short-lived marriage.
And under these circumstances, and I thought what you know, that visual that Julie painted really well about, you know, 2015, Trudeau walking up, then, you know, with his partner Sophie and the kids, and it was warm, and it was a sunny day, and, you know, the Sunny Ways slogan was living large then, like this is dreary ways, you know. It is honestly kind of hard to watch.
You know, it's funny though, because as they're coming out these messages, when they said yes, which was before this morning, right? The narrative was even different because it keeps changing. The narrative today now is Jagmeet Singh.
Exactly.
And so I'll posit this question to you. You know, up until this morning, before we heard from Jagmeet Singh, arguably Justin Trudeau had a bit more time. You know, Rachel Bendiah was saying he's reflecting. And before this morning, he had more time to do that reflection. I don't know if he has that time anymore. Like he was already losing control of his own government, already losing control of the House, and now he's lost the one partner, even though not officially his dancing partner. He was banking on, I think, the fact that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP would not want to go to a vote at this moment in time. How much of this narrative is now completely out of Justin Trudeau's hands?
It is. Yes, that's the issue. And so I think there will be prorogation because I don't see any other way out. If you go back to Parliament on January 27, I mean, you're going to be voted out, so you're better to have a few months. But what do you do with those few months? I mean, does Trudeau stays or leave? We don't know. I think we won't have the answer today. There will be a cabinet meeting. We won't hear about the Prime Minister. Could it be tomorrow? That's a possibility. Could be early January. That's another possibility. But the fact is that he has created, again, the contrary of what he was planning. He was planning stability with this new cabinet, and now we have instability. The instability is now greater than it was this morning before Jagmeet Singh, because now it's, okay, we really need a plan B and quick. And so Donald Trump, January 20th. And so yes, it is out of his control. And it is concerning for Canadians. And I don't buy this idea of, oh, Canadians, it's Christmas, they're going to go back in their family, they won't discuss that. No, we talk about politics during Christmas, and that's going to be a talk. And so,
in some ways, Michael, he actually has given the worst possible answer. He's reflecting on his future. That means he's thinking of leaving. And so all of us are concerned, what does that mean for this particular cabinet he's appointed now? What does it mean for the next few months as Donald Trump prepares to take the presidency? What does it mean for the leadership of the Liberal Party? That's the worst answer he could have given. So he's created his own problem here because nobody thinks he should stay in the sort of the broader, I shouldn't say nobody, the majority of Canadians and certainly members of his caucus now think it's time for him to leave. And he's given credence to that by saying, I've heard you, I'm going to listen to you, and then we're left waiting to see what that decision is.
I'm just curious as to the proroguing, and I think that sounds like an option because during that time, maybe you could restore some kind of stability, but it all depends what he does. And so what are his options during proroguing? You know, does he say, okay, I'm going to prorogue and then call an election, I'm going to prorogue and leave, I'm going to prorogue, call a leadership contest? Each choice, each option, each door you open has its own problems.
Which is the uncertainty.
What's that?
Which is the bigger uncertainty.
Exactly.
So we are more in an uncertain world since 11:30 than we were
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what is he reflecting on? Like, that's the part I'm just like, what is the future? But this is the part where, again, I mean, I don't think anyone predicted that Chrystia Freeland was going to do what she did on Monday. But there, you know, again, we've talked about the polling numbers. Here they come again.
And magically, Kristy speaks, and the next group comes out. Let's take a listen.
Just before beginning, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an opening statement and then turn it over to you for questions. I want to begin as the new Minister of Public Safety to recognize the terrible tragedies that have taken place in both Toronto and Montreal over the last 24 hours. There is no place in Canada for this kind of conduct. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Jewish community. This is a very, very serious matter for us and our government. I will be leaving this media availability to be briefed by senior officials on these two occurrences and more. So I just wanted to express, we wanted to express our solidarity with the Jewish community. Our hearts and thoughts, prayers are with them at this difficult moment. We'll have more to say about this in due course. So on that note, we turn it over to you for your questions.
Bonjour, la question, Monsieur McGuinty, est pour vous.
Mr. McGuinty, we have a question for you. Are you going to be responsible for the border as Minister of Public Safety? I know that, Madame Brière, you're having issues with your voice, but Jagmeet Singh said today that he will put down the government. So before they gave you this position, did you receive some instructions? Are you prepared to be there for 2 months or 3 months? Thank you for the question. Let's go back to the border question, to the issue at the border. I will be working with Minister Leblanc. He was participating at the meetings prior to my nomination. I will be part of the Canada-US Committee. We will put into place the plan that was distributed this week. So it will be a shared responsibility with Mr. Leblanc. I have to learn a lot. I have my deputy minister, and there's also Minister Leblanc who've been tackling this issue for many months. We will be working together. And like I said, this is a Team Canada approach. We will be more than one minister, and some of them are behind me. We will do our best to tackle the challenges with the new Trump administration. Follow-up question? So how long will you stay in position? You will be receiving all of the information during the Christmas holidays. Actually, we're there to govern. We're there also to... Well, we're very experienced ministers, and we will be fighting for Canadians as long as needed. You know, parliamentary issues are very serious. We will continue to offer solutions. We will continue to govern the country, and we will be tackling economic issues. We will be working for Canadians, for Canadian workers, and we will stay as long as needed. Can you say on the other language?
What you're seeing today is a cabinet full of new energy, obviously coupled with experience and competence with all of my colleagues. For my part, the economy, jobs, workers, that's going to be my focus. And this cabinet and this government will continue offering solutions for Canadians as long as we go. Of course, other opposition parties are free to vote as they will, but we will be continuing to offer solutions for Canadians right up to our last day.
Hi, Ministers. Laura Osmond with The Logic. My question is for Minister McGuinty. I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper on your role in terms of U.S.-Canada relations. Chrystia Freeland and Minister LeBlanc work quite closely on that file. What do you see your role as being in terms of leading the government's efforts against the Trump tariff trade threats? And what will your responsibilities be, given that LeBlanc is taking so much responsibility for the border?
I think our approach is one where we recognize that we need all hands on deck, where not only different portfolios, different ministers must cooperate, but for that matter, we have to cooperate with our premiers, our big city mayors, our Indigenous leaders, different business representatives, because this really is a Team Canada approach. I'm convinced that we're going to be able to resolve the issues between Canada and the incoming American administration. We have a history of cooperating. This is the largest undefended border in the world. We have always overcome challenges between us. Both sides of the border understand the importance of security in terms of the economy. Yesterday, we had the border czar from the United States on Canadian television saying there were very, very many positive developments in the relationship as we find our way forward and manage this most important of relationships. So I'm encouraged. I'll be working with Minister LeBlanc and others to make sure that we bring a seamless approach to resolving these issues on behalf of Canadians. And we're getting right to work. I mean, right after this meeting, most of us are meeting with our deputy ministers and moving forward.
But what specifically is your responsibility?
My responsibility will be to work, obviously, with the RCMP, with the Canada Border Services Agency, with overseeing Correctional Services Canada, obviously the Security CSIS, Intelligence Service. My responsibility will be to work with my partners in the United States and to actually begin delivering on much of the resources that have been provided to public safety just this last week in the economic statement, which will allow us to make improvements to meet the challenges that the White House seems to be raising with us. I am convinced that working together with my colleagues here and beyond, we're going to do this for Canadians. This is just too important not to get right together.
This will be the last question. Dernière question, s'il vous plaît.
Hi, Ministers. Raïs Patel, the Toronto Star. The Prime Minister is not, standing behind you, supporting you publicly. The Prime Minister is not here today to answer questions and address Canadians. My question's for each of you. What do you make of that?
The Prime Minister is working hard to make sure that we lead this government and we deal with the pressing issues of today. The Prime Minister has all of our full support, and he obviously has shown lots of confidence in us, and that's why we're here today. We were just with him inside and had some great conversation as to the work that we have ahead of us. And we're really laser focused on doing that work and making sure we deliver for Canadians.
It is a very important moment for all of us, and we're there to work together. We have to work for Canadians. We have to fulfill the needs of our population, and it's a very difficult moment. And as you can see, there's a lot of energy around the table. We want to work for everyone. We have to look forward, make the right decision, and this is what we will do. In French? Where is the Prime Minister? He's not there. Do you think he has to leave? It's more than one question. Actually, we trust the Prime Minister, and we have trust in the government. We wouldn't be there if it was not the case. At the same time, we want to face all of the challenges that we have. David mentioned a couple of elements, such as the border, our relations with the United States. These are our priorities. We also have the economy, employment, and workers. I've been tackling this issue over the past few months, and I will focus on that in my new role.
Government's falling apart.
He's left you alone in the cold. Where is he?
The Prime Minister has, of course, been working all week, working to fashion the government and to continue to work on our priorities. The Prime Minister is the hardest working person I know.
This was the last question.
Journalist was good morning a week ago. How can he do this?
The Prime Minister has been very focused on working with his cabinet, working with his government on Canadians' priorities.
That was the last question. You could go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Open mic.
Look, the Liberal Party is an extraordinary institution. I remember being here this summer and discussing the fact that you should never count the Liberal Party of Canada out. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas, Joyeux Noël à tout le monde. Merci. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, the last grouping of new ministers sworn in today. Let's go to Andrew Thomson right now at Rideau Hall. And Andrew, without a doubt, very much message track there from the new ministers. But the big question is, where is Justin Trudeau?
Exactly, and we were told to expect this morning, that the Prime Minister was not going to come out and take questions. You talked about it with the panel, that it's pretty irregular for a Prime Minister with a cabinet shuffle of this size not to come out, appear with those new ministers, or to take questions. So that is the end of the scrums happening here at Rideau Hall, with the 12 ministers involved in today's shuffle. And the action is now going to actually shift more towards Parliament Hill now this afternoon. There is a cabinet meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. Eastern with this newly configured cabinet. So certainly there will be reporters hoping to get a word from the Prime Minister before or after that meeting. As well, Michael, we are standing by to hear from the Conservative leader on Parliament Hill. Pierre Poilievre is holding a news conference in just a few moments, and so it will be interesting to hear what his reaction is to this cabinet shuffle. We have heard him already this week say that the government is broken, that the government is in crisis. In his words, he talked about it being a clown show of chaos and a sign of weakness that was leading Donald Trump to mock Canada, to laugh at Canada. So we are standing by for those remarks.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Thank you for braving the cold. And it's a cold one out there, so really appreciate it. That's my last follow-up. Andrew Thomson, CPAC at Rideau Hall, thank you very much. Well, listen, let's quickly show people the view of the foyer of the House Commons, because we will in a few minutes' time be bringing people there to the foyer. That's where we're expecting to hear Pierre Poilievre in just a few minutes' time, as Andrew was talking. But before we get there, until we get there, I'm going to go back to our panel here. Two things that stand out for me, and then I'll get all of you to react. One, Ruby Sahota had the most full-throated statement of support for the Prime Minister of everyone that we've heard up there. But two, despite her support, the where's Waldo question, where is Justin Trudeau, as he's trying to project this image of solidarity, unity, and to borrow the words from, I think it was Steve McKinnon, a new sense of energy with this cabinet. What do you say to all that, Chris?
I think the fact that he has not spoken about Chrystia Freeland or spoken to why he chose this particular cabinet to reflect the priorities he hopes to pursue is an indication that he is not in control of the narrative or the dynamics on Parliament Hill right now. He's left the space open to Pierre Poilievre when he comes out. Jagmeet Singh has already released a letter talking about non-confidence. To be silent now is just the worst strategic decision I can think of as someone who has both been a journalist and now works as a consultant. It's not the way you leave the public hanging on where you think you are and what you want to do. So we'll see if he comes out at 3 o'clock after the cabinet meeting. He may very briefly, but he has to address some of these big issues about how he feels that he has still the authority, moral or otherwise, to continue leading this government when so many people, even inside his own caucus, seem to think his time is up.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. You know, it's almost something that politicians forget all the time, but we're always reminding them, nature abhors a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not fill in that space, someone will fill in it for you, and if you're the Prime Minister with the levers of government and not filling the space, that is not a very strong signal to be sending.
Right. So you just saw the whole thing go off the rails because everybody wants to know where's the Prime Minister. So you can talk about the new energy that you've got in your team. You can talk about what you're going to do at the border. You can talk about all the meetings you're going to have. Stephen McKinnon said, we're going to be there as long as we possibly can. Well, that's not very reassuring. So, I mean, where's your chief salesperson? I mean, I don't want to be, can't think of the word, effronté, rude? Like, is he peeking outside the curtains? Like, do I go out? Do I dare? Whatever. He didn't come out. And all those reporters who are freezing out there, I'm not saying that's part of the thing, but everybody's wondering, you've got a cabinet shuffle, you've got a government in trouble, you've got a Trump administration coming down on January 20th, and you had the week we had. Where is he? And that's what everybody was asking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so whatever your message is, it doesn't get heard.
Yeah, yeah. Kristy?
Yeah, I think that I think there's a very short window of time. I think if Justin Trudeau is to go away, and again, this whole idea of maybe he goes away over the holidays, I'm not sure what what is going to evolve in that period. And that's why I keep coming back to that question of like, what's he reflecting on? We know what the poll numbers are. We know what the by-election results have been. We know that, the most central player around your cabinet table, essentially told you in a polite way to get bent, right? Like it was a very direct, hard-hitting letter. And now, again, you have ministers that are trying to go out, and again, you hear them trying to do it. We are united. This is a serious time. It draws me back to that whole idea in the Nate Erskine-Smith video where he talked about international issues and dealing with that and kind of the domestic fire, if you will, that blew up for him at home. Yes, obviously, the country is in a very important time. Donald Trump is about to be president again. He has parlayed what he is thinking about in the way of tariffs. There is considerable concern about what this will mean for Canada. No one is discounting that this is a serious moment. But I recall, again, in that cabinet shuffle, which I was asking a question to Justin Trudeau, because, again, he was speaking to reporters at that time in July of 2023, the big shakeup that we were talking about earlier. And he talked about storm clouds all over the world. This isn't, I'm not saying there aren't storm clouds in all parts of the world, but there's some serious storm clouds here in Canada, like above your office, right? Like this. Mm-hmm. And so that's that moment of, I think just being able to hear what, even like, he's been asked this many, many times by different people, but like, what's keeping you in the game? Why would you want to do this? And he has not been able to kind of, I think, make that case as to why he should stay. So yeah, of course, every leader is going to have reflections, but I think, it's taken him a lot of time. And yet somehow, I don't know, there's, again, reporters were calling out, they weren't adhering to the one question rule, and they were saying, you're leaving your ministers out in the cold. Like, that is not a good look. That's not an editorial comment. It's just, from a communications perspective, it's just, that is what just happened.
Yeah, Geneviève.
And we had Joe Biden that went on TV to explain his leadership. And we had Emmanuel Macron recently doing the same thing because it doesn't go very well for him. And I cannot help thinking that he had those interviews with the media that he had just canceled would have been great platform for him because he's good at those interviews. He knows the interviewers and he would have been able to explain many things, not everything. So maybe he could have said, well, I have not taken my decision. I don't know if I stay or if I leave, but I will do a cabinet shuffle because of that. I will deal with Donald Trump this way. I will deal with prorogation of parliament or whatever that way. And so just giving some answer and doing that one-on-one with those interviews, for me, that was a mistake. I don't understand why he has done it. I understand the uncertainty. I understand that the timing was perhaps not very good, but the question would have been tough. They are tough now. They will get tougher and tougher. And so why has he not decided to do so? I think he was ill-advised on that front, and probably should have done those hard, difficult interview, but at least speak with people. So I don't know if you may disagree.
No, I agree with you totally. He should have spoken to people, but to go into year-end interviews that are being staggered in terms of their release, when he doesn't know if he's staying or going, doesn't know anything about what the future might unfold, whether he's going to prorogue, as you've been suggesting, or stick it out, that would have been a real problem. Yeah. But we all agree.
But at the same time, you explain why there's this problem with Chrystia Freeland. You explain Mark Cartney. You explain many past things. At least you provide some, because now we're talking and talking, but at least there are some elements of, and you say frankly, okay, this I don't know. I'm going to think about that, and I will come back on you.
Maybe he can't make his case. That's the problem.
And I think this
maybe he can't give a good explanation about why she was treated the way she was.
Well, then he's lost the battle, hasn't
he? Well, that's
yes.
it. And so he obviously didn't feel sure enough to go into those interviews because he doesn't understand what position he's going to take. Those two guys, when he went into his car last night outside the Langevin building, one yelled, "Trudeau leave," and the other yelled, "Trudeau stay." I mean, I think he probably changes his mind every, whatever someone tells him. He probably doesn't know. But the Jagmeet Singh thing may push him into more of a corner.
It was interesting, though, because without a doubt, the issues being raised, as they're trying to change the channel a little bit here, the new cabinet ministers, without a doubt, anti-Semitism is on the rise.
Yeah.
The school shooting outside of Toronto, 2:30 this morning, North Toronto, I should say, the third time this Jewish day school has been shot at. What happened at the synagogue in Montreal a couple of days ago, huge issues, troubling, says something horrible that's happening within our country. So that is raised, an important issue. The trade threat that is being raised by Donald Trump, the existential threat on Canada's economy, considering how much we trade with the United States, huge issues. What is the juxtaposition of these huge issues we're going to tackle them, but with the absence of a leader. I think that's the hard part here, right? Like, I mean, these issues are very serious. I take it that they're trying to prove that, you know, we're going to take this on, I'm going to be briefed on it, this is important to us. Good that it's important to you, but without your leader, how strong is that message? How effective are you actually tackling this issue? It seems a bit empty, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it's unprecedented. That's the problem. Like I say, I've never seen a cabinet shuffle, and the Prime Minister of the day not proud to show his team, or her team. Well, her team with Kim Campbell, I guess, but show.
One day, Julie.
Yeah, one day. No, but to show, here's my team. This is what we're going to do. But the problem is they've got such a short time constraint, and he's being assailed. So he basically is being attacked on all sides, and he can't explain his position because he probably doesn't maybe know his next step. Maybe he does now, but he didn't.
So do we all assume that the next time we hear from him is when he does make up his mind, whenever that may be? That seems to be the only conclusion to reach at this point, that he's not going to speak until he has decided whether he stays or goes.
Yeah. Okay, but to that, though, because you think about the last big cabinet shuffle in 2023. You know, I'm thinking back to the Liberal Party convention, because at the time when he was signaling the fact that his intent was to lead the party one more time into a campaign, historically, a fourth mandate is damn near impossible, right? But here he is promising it, and in that leadership convention, the two things were in my mind. One, the fact is when you looked over the video, it wasn't about campaigning for the future, it was about looking backwards. Right? Everything about that was like, look what we've done, not what we're going to do. But also up against that was, or juxtaposed to that, was this idea that he would still be, Liberals believe, the best person to take on Pierre Poilievre. I don't know if they can make that brag anymore, that Justin Trudeau is the guy to take on Pierre Poilievre.
No, and it's not just a personality problem, it's an idea problem. I recall the meeting on Tuesday this week. He had some ovation about, there were staffers there, so that's normal that Liberal cheer the Prime Minister. But the topic that got the most cheer was the topic on abortion. Abortion is no more an issue now. As it was in 2015, or even a bit later with Andrew Scheer or Erin O'Toole. It's housing, it's the cost of living, it's Donald Trump. And so I think that, because I recall the convention also, the topic that were popular and that Trudeau is showcasing are no longer relevant to Canadians. They don't want to hear about that. But Trudeau and his surrounding doesn't get that. And I think that's the main issue, is that he's no more relevant, not just his personality, because some are kind of tired about the persona, but it's about the core issue. And yes, he's talking about the past, which is always what outgoing party are doing, that they have to live with that. But he hasn't given a reason for Canadians to say, vote for me because I will bring you there. The future is not clear with Trudeau. It's just about, trust me, it's going to be fine. You'll have more generous public programs. But I don't think that's what anymore Canadians want to hear. And it's relevance that's not there anymore.
I was reflecting as you were talking about the 2021 election, because at that time there were people, and I think even Jerry Butts, his former principal secretary, talked about, the timing of that election and kind of concerns about the timing of that election. That election did not go well for Justin Trudeau. Obviously, it was another minority. And I point to that, and I'm just reflecting on it because it was one of those moments where, again, it kind of reflected on I would say the judgment of Justin Trudeau and the people around him. There were people, even those who, again, had been in his inner circle, who were kind of saying to him, this was COVID cases were still a major concern. People were masking. I don't really want to talk about having to wear a mask and test myself every day flying all over the country. It was a very cursed time, honestly, for an election to play out for a lot of reasons, and logistical challenges because of that, right? And the point being that whole election, he was just trying to be like, there was that element of the trust me factor. That's what made me think of it when it's just kind of like, well, trust me. And again, I think he in years past was able to bank on kind of the goodwill, again, from people. We talked about his political resilience, that he was able to weather political storms in a way that other politicians could not. He is a formidable campaigner. You cannot take that away from him, which is why, again, I would never make any predictions, but I think inherently in him, because of this, his views on Pierre Poilievre, and his love of an election campaign, I mean, again, who knows? I don't know if is it out of the realm of the possible that he just says, okay, let's just go into an election.
He's never lost yet, so maybe he doesn't think that he thinks maybe he can find some inner strength and overcome all the adversities that's out there. And that's his modus operandi, right? You push him up into a corner and he fights back, whether it's in the boxing ring or in the House of Commons. So maybe that's still within him. I don't know. I don't know what stage he's at, but I mean, it's hard to imagine that it would be.
Yeah. I was struck by something Stephen McKinnon said. And don't ever count the Liberal Party out.
Yeah.
And the Liberal brand in this country has been extraordinarily strong over the last century.
Yeah.
Won more elections than they've lost, led this country more often than not. But that was dodging the question about whether the person leading the Liberal Party was the right person at this time. You know, Steve is in a position to know because he was executive director with Frank McKenna in New Brunswick. Frank McKenna left after 2 terms, knowing that it was time for a change. And that's where we're confronted. As you said, winning 4 elections, it's really, really hard to do. Stephen Harper couldn't do it, and he ended with a majority. This guy went from a majority to 2 minorities, the second one smaller than the first. It's
losing
a difficult
popular vote of the last 2.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
it's not a very efficient vote for the Conservatives. In fairness, they won a lot of very few ridings by huge margins.
Yes.
But the point here being that the shelf life of any leader, let alone any government, is finite, and for some reason he isn't prepared to accept that, and maybe it's the advice he's given, maybe he sees polls that we don't. But it suggests to me that he hasn't really come to grips with, this is end of regime time. It's time to move on. It's time to leave this to somebody else. And that decision should have been made some time ago.
And I've also heard pollsters say that his adversaries, none of them actually play better than he does.
Well,
and not adversaries, sorry, the people that want to, the other leadership potentials, right?
Yes.
So if that's still the case, and he looks at that, and he might be saying in his head, you know, I'm going to wear this. I'm going to go in. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to do what Brian Mulroney didn't do. I'm not turning it over to somebody else.
Yeah, although, you know, a lot of the argument from the Liberal side still seems to be that once Canadians know Pierre Poilievre, because, of course, we know Pierre Poilievre more closely because we follow it day in, day out. But the argument from the Liberals is once Canadians know Pierre Poilievre, they're going to come back to the Liberal Party, perhaps Justin Trudeau. You know, that seems to be the argument. Do you think that holds in any way whatsoever?
I think the Liberals have learned in December that Pierre Poilievre has good idea that appeal to Canadians, and so that's why they give a GST break and a $250 check, because they finally got it. And probably because of the American election also, so they finally got it that cost of living is the topic. And so yes, that's what we're being hearing from the Liberals. It's about, okay, yes, but wait to see their ideas. You won't like their ideas. And what the Liberal Party has not realized is that Canadians do like the ideas of the Conservative that are going contrary to their own ideas. And I think with that GST pause and check, that was kind of a realization, okay, let's forget Medicare and pharmacare. They are costly. That's not what Canadians want for a moment. And I'm talking about many Canadians, not every Canadians, but a good majority of 45% now of Canadians that are ready to vote Conservative.
It's a change election. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
If people want change, I can't remember the year, I don't remember, but I think Roy Romano lost to a gas station attendant. If people want change, in Quebec, the Orange Wave, they wanted change. When people want change, you can throw the money at them and they'll take it, but it doesn't mean they're going to vote for you.
And which is evidenced by the fact that when you look at the polling numbers, it hasn't been moved by the GST holiday. It hasn't been moved by the promise of a $250 check, which does not appear in the fall economic statement, right? So it's
everything they've done so far hasn't worked.
Yeah. What do you say to it, Chris?
Well, I don't disagree with anything that I've heard. Pierre Poilievre has mastered the message. He is very good on his feet when he delivers it. He hasn't done any real sort of one-on-one interviews where people can dig more deeply into what he's proposing, holding obviously those things to an election campaign and a potential platform. And Justin Trudeau, the legacy of the government, I would be proud of it if I was him. He has done some significant things on childcare, on dental care, pharmacare. These things were significant social policy initiatives. But things are different now, and most people, as we've been hearing in this panel, are concerned about their pocketbooks, are concerned about the standard of living they have and what their children can expect. And that requires a different message. And so far, as you said it, I think a little earlier about his messages when he was talking to the various conventions and party gatherings, is about the past, the legacy. Well, that's not going to get people to vote for you. A legacy. They want to know what you want to do next. How you can help me now. So if he's going to stay, he needs to change that message. He needs to put things in the window that Canadians are talking about, which is not what he's done in the past, it's about what he needs to do next.
Okay. Before I have you speak, Kristy, let's show people one more time the foyer of the House of Commons. This is where we're expecting Pierre Poilievre. Now, I was under the understanding that he'd be speaking in about 15 minutes ago, so we will wait on that as Julie looks at her watch. I'm going to get to Chris. Yeah.
When she speaks, he'll come out.
So Kristy, over to you.
I mean, when we talk about Justin Trudeau failing to kind of make the case to Canadians as to why he should be the one to lead at this particular time, I mean, it's not like he hasn't had that question, right? There have been a number. He was doing the podcast circuit for a while. He was trying, that afforded him, the PMO thought a little bit more runway to explain his thinking, and and again in that interview with Erskine Smith, you can tell he does still have that energy, that zeal for politics. He is passionate about the issues. He talked about some of his regrets, even on electoral reform, which was a central pledge that, of course, the Liberals did not, did not act on, and some of some of the do-over moments, I guess he wishes he had. That whole idea of earlier this week about him going on kind of at length, almost said it was like that job interview, right? It's a little strange to me that after a decade, or 9.5 years, that Justin Trudeau at this moment, for many years he was that skilled, maybe not skilled communicator, but his team was effective, right, in terms of its messaging and kind of the theme they were kind of trying to construct. And there's been a lot of hand-wringing about this in recent months, like why isn't the message landing? How can we change it? Experimenting with different formats, and somehow again it's like I don't know if it's that the team hasn't been able to reflect inward, and I don't know, maybe I don't want to use a Taylor Swift reference, but it's like at some point it's like I'm the problem, it's and to at least acknowledge that, right? Like, I get it. You don't like me. We've been through a lot of things together. I was the prime minister during a pandemic. Do you think people get popular during a pandemic leading a country? The answer is no. We had to make hard decisions, and and there's been different iterations of this, but it's like. And the convoy and the increased violence and hatred that has been directed towards we've seen this with the Sergeant of Arms talking about this. This is a increasingly polarized time in politics. There's more threats directed at MPs, including the Prime Minister, of course. This is not an easy time to be a politician. No one is disputing that. So, what's your why? And if maybe it's about, at some point, maybe he'll come out and authentically say what his why is, why he wants to go, why he wants to fight an election. But I think that's the big question for me, and has been for months. If what are you doing? And I don't know why they haven't been able to curtail their message in such a way that at least there's like, I think it's about, it comes down to authenticity, right? It's like, okay, well, we need to be united. Like, no, like, no.
Yeah.
People are saying they want you to pack up and leave your job, including some of your, longtime close confidants. Like, what brings you to want to stay? And maybe the answer is he doesn't. I don't know.
Let's visit some scenarios here, though, because as we say, we don't say it. The Prime Minister says that he's going to think about it right now. So what are the options? Because if, for example, Parliament comes back after the break, was I think January 28th is the day that they 27th, somewhere around there. Okay. When it comes back and he doesn't prorogue, the government still controls when the next opposition day will happen, correct? Or will it be a vote on the, for example, fall economic statement that will be a matter of confidence that brings them down? How do you see that scenario playing out if he doesn't prorogue Parliament before the return?
Well, we still have the opposition party with their motion. That's not over. It was suspended.
The question of privilege.
The privilege motion, yes.
It was suspended temporarily to have the economic
statement.
Presented, and so the opposition will control up to a point the beginning of the session of the days, but after that is going to be government business. I'm not sure they need a vote on the economic statement because there is no real ways and means and motion to pass. And after that, we'll have bills tabled and motion.
But is Parliament still going to be paralyzed when they come back?
So that's my point, is what's the move of the opposition party? My understanding is that they will finish that because obviously they go nowhere with that and they could not have motion of confidence. They will be now, so that the counter is gone back to zero. So we have 7 new motion of non-confidence related to the estimates that are going to be tabled before the end of March. So it means in 2 months about 7 votes. So will they be spread out? Government controls that, so that we don't know, and then we'll see. But there will be a vote on the new estimates. So it's not supplementary estimates. Principal estimate that's coming at the end of March. So we have many votes that are now coming, and then the budget.
That's what Yves-François Blanchet says, right? This government will never make it past the budget. I think he was saying that in his news release. So for sure, there's the budget and probably other things before. And as soon as they get their first opportunity, they now have Jagmeet Singh on side.
So what are the discussions that you would be having if you're in that office with the Prime Minister? When do you need to make a decision, whatever it is? If you decide to stay, to your question, when do you want to fall? Because at some point you're going to realize that there's going to be a confidence motion or estimates to vote on. You get still to choose the timing of that, even though there's a privilege consideration going. And then thirdly is, how much time do we need to find a successor or someone to lead, even on a temporary basis, to lead the party until a new leader can be chosen? These are all difficult questions. There's not much runway, as people keep saying. It could be as small as a few weeks into January, February, or it could be until the budget, which can be March or April. This government in particular seems to delay when it puts it out. But either way, you're going to fall, apparently. So he gets to choose that timing. So those are the kinds of considerations I think you're making. Andrew Bevan, who is a national campaign director, will have to be in those discussions about what's best for us. How ready are we to lead a campaign for the federal election? These are the kind of operational questions I think they have to consider.
Yeah, and whether or not. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was thinking, in a way, it's moved past him, right? So maybe in the past week is, do I stay or go? What's best for me, for my family? What's best for this? What about my legacy? What about? But now, because of the Jagmeet Singh ultimatum, I bet you the people, I mean, he's probably got different people coming in, depending where it's at in terms of what outside forces come in. But now it's almost past him and what's best for your party. Yeah. Because it seems obvious he can't hang on. And now what is best for the Liberal Party of Canada?
Yeah. Or does he have the hubris to put together a budget and say, this is my campaign platform?
Because that would be the best. The best showcase for you, it's the budget, because all the spotlights are there, and then you have, again, your platform, you have all your new initiative. Why should you vote for me? For the budget. So you already have somewhat.
And is that best for his party, if he does that?
But Justin Trudeau brought the Liberals back from the political dead. And much of the Liberal brand has been built around Justin Trudeau for many years now. So I'm not opining on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the reality of it. And so I don't know. Maybe there is a feeling. I have no idea, but I think there could be that, I gave this party these key years. His kids have, again, we're talking about almost a decade, right? Like Nate Erskine-Smith was talking about the impact on family life. We've watched, again, personal developments with the Prime Minister, including his marriage, deteriorating and the separation. Again, we talked about him leading during a pandemic. There have been a series of challenges over the last number of years. So I don't know, perhaps there's a feeling like I get to determine at what time that I get to pull the plug because, I don't know.
I think arguably he could have sat in that place more so at the beginning of the week versus today after Jagmeet Singh's letter. Right, Jagmeet Singh's letter changes the calculus for him. Now, that said, I'm going to point out the fact that Kristy Kirkup has talked us through to Pierre Poilievre because we're now getting the 1 minute warning on Pierre Poilievre. But obviously,
I'm always a little afraid to speak now. You never know what's going to happen.
No, I appreciate it. So obviously, thank you for today to Chris, to Julie, to Kristy, and to Geneviève. Thank you for walking us through this. A very interesting cabinet shuffle, as we've noted. Looks like a temporary cabinet as to whatever may happen. I think the hard part is the acknowledgement that our Christmas holidays may actually be cut short, depending on what happens with Justin Trudeau.
Have you bought any gifts? That's all I can say. I haven't.
I online ordered them a long time ago. We're okay. But okay, so we're now waiting for Pierre Poilievre on at the foyer to respond to what has happened today. And as we wait, and I guess a bit delayed, what will you guys be watching for? A quick roundtable from all of you between now and the return of Parliament.
Repeated the message track that he has been using all along. Time to go, time to have a carbon tax election, and the same themes that there's no confidence left, even in your own party, for you to continue as leader.
Yeah, he'll be trashing Justin Trudeau about the fact he wasn't there, about the fact that these cabinet ministers are only there for 5 minutes or whatever analogy he wants to use, and he'll be dumping on Jagmeet Singh for finally seeing the light of day.
Yeah, I do think that Jagmeet Singh will be a major focus of his message today. Obviously, we saw that in the tweet that Pierre Poilievre put out, so I'm sure we'll see a version of that, again, amongst the other key messages about, again, this being a government that's run out of gas, and it's time to give Canadians a say, according to the Conservative leader.
Oh, and it is chaos. So that's going to be a word, as he's going to say. And having a cabinet that we don't know what the cabinet will work on, for how long, what is the leadership. So he's going to bring that also in his talks.
What's he going to call it when Donald Trump was there for 4 years if this is chaos?
Well, we will find out. Again, thank you to the four of you. There is Pierre Poilievre and the foyer of the House of Commons. Let's take a listen.
C'est une comédie.
It's a comedy.
Un cirque de clown.
It's a clown show.
Ou je ne sais quoi.
I don't know what it is really,
C'est clair que le
but it is
Premier
clear that the Prime Minister has lost control. He has lost the control of our borders, of immigration, of spending, of inflation, of debt,
de la criminalité et des
of crime and drugs.
même perdu contrôle.
He's even lost the control of his own party.
Son ministre des Finances
His Minister of Finance
démissionné quelques
resigned a couple of hours before she was due to deliver the
un déficit
financial economic statement, which she was about to announce a deficit of 60 billion. This is 55% higher than he promised 8 months ago.
C'est un drame.
It's dramatic. It's chaos. It's like a soap opera where the players are looking after themselves. They're no longer working for Canadians. They're fighting over positions and power when what the country needs is some control. Let's look at Mr. Trudeau, for example. He's been in office for 9 years now. He's caused a huge decline in our standard of living, an explosion in crime, and he wants to stay in office. Ms. Freeland, she wanted to keep her position, even with the huge deficit and broken promises, and even with skyrocketing out-of-control spending, until the Prime Minister told her that he wanted to fire her. Mr. Carney, the economic advisor to Mr. Trudeau, he wanted to become Minister of Finance until he realized that this would be embarrassing for him. So suddenly, after having contributed to the economic plan, to the FES, he changed his mind. Mr. Blanchet, who voted 200 times to keep Justin Trudeau in power, including just 10 days ago, in fact, suddenly he's changed his mind also, and he said he's amazed by the chaos that's been created by the Trudeau government. And Mr. Jagmeet Singh, let's look at him. A man who announced in September that he would rip up his deal with Justin Trudeau, and then he voted 8 times to keep Mr. Trudeau in office after that, including just 11 days ago. If Mr. Singh had voted non-confidence 11 days ago when I tabled a motion, including his own words, we would be now 11 days into an election campaign, but he saved Mr. Trudeau. And all of a sudden, after the House of Commons is shut down for Christmas, and you can't table motions, he says he's ready to vote in favour of a non-confidence motion. It's ridiculous. That's the clown show we're facing currently. But I'm not interested about that. I'm interested in ordinary people, ordinary Canadians who are facing doubled housing costs over the past 9 years. I'm interested in people who have experienced the worst inflation rate in housing of all the G7 countries. I'm interested also in the crisis facing the 2 million people who use food banks. That's doubled under Mr. Trudeau. I'm interested in the victims of crime, an increase in 50% since Mr. Trudeau came to office, and 116% increase in terms of violent crime. I'm interested in people also who are now unemployed because of the destructive policies of Mr. Trudeau. I'm interested in workers who are forced to use tools which are of worse quality than those used by their American counterparts. I'm interested in single mothers who have to pay more for their food because the cost of food has gone up by 37% more quickly here in Canada than in the US. I'm also interested in the situation of families who have lost a loved one. 47,000 people who have died from an overdose after the Trudeau drug policies, and supported by the Bloc, I would add, and supported by Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Singh, Ms. Freeland, Mr. Carney, or Mr. Trudeau. Are these people working on these issues? No, they're working for themselves. What we learned today, really, is that Mr. Trudeau no longer has the confidence of Parliament, even. Of course, the Conservatives don't have confidence in him either. The Bloc all of a sudden says that it doesn't have confidence in Mr. Trudeau either. Mr. Singh now has come to the realization that he doesn't have confidence in Mr. Trudeau. Also, there are 18 members of Parliament who have said that they don't have confidence in Mr. Trudeau either. And all that since the last confidence motion, so Mr. Trudeau can no longer govern. You can't govern without the confidence of the House of Commons. This is why in a couple of minutes I'll be sending a letter to the Governor-General asking her to recall Parliament so that we can hold a confidence vote on Mr. Trudeau, so that we can decide whether we have elections or not, so that we can allow Canadians to have renewed control over their lives, over the borders, over immigration, over spending, inflation, the cost of living as well, by bringing down the deficit, by removing GST from new homes, by cutting
l'aide à l'étranger,
corporate welfare, bureaucracy, red tape, and consultants so that we can take control of spending again. This is what we need. This is what we need. In about a month's time, the Americans will have a new president. If we have a confidence vote, a vote of non-confidence in the House of Commons in the next few days, we'll be able to have a Prime Minister with a real mandate by the end of January. And this is what we need. We need someone who's strong, someone who can face down Mr. Trump, who can stand up to him, who can restore the control over spending, immigration, our borders, crime, and protect Canadians as well. We have to put an end to working for politicians and clown show and chaos on Parliament Hill. We have to work for Canadians. We have to put Canada first.
Thank you very much, everyone. Today we saw the next episode of the chaotic clown show that is costing Canadians after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. And look at all the players in this drama. They're taking care of themselves, fighting for their own personal self-interest while they embarrass the country, tank our dollar, unleash crime and chaos in our community, threaten our trade relationship with our biggest partner. Let's go through these players. Justin Trudeau, who egomaniacally holds on to power even though 80% of Canadians want to fire him. Then there's Chrystia Freeland, who is just fine with doubling the debt, doubling housing costs, doubling the number of people going to food banks, quadrupling the carbon tax, breaking the immigration system, but then suddenly had a change of heart the second she realized she was getting a demotion. So it was really all about her. A demotion that would see her replaced with carbon tax Carney, who had committed to the Prime Minister that he would take the job of Finance Minister after he, as the economic advisor after all, helped write this fall economic update with a $62 billion deficit included in it. And then you have Jagmeet Singh, who, after he duped you all and claimed he'd ripped up his deal with Trudeau, voted 8 times to keep Trudeau in office over the last session of Parliament, and including voting against a non-confidence motion that was made up of his own words 11 days ago. If he had voted for his own words, we would be a third of the way into an election campaign right now. But he suddenly had an epiphany and says that he can no longer support the costly chaos that he has enabled as part of the NDP Liberal coalition. This is quite the drama with all these personalities that you're all breathlessly covering, but I'm interested in the dramas of other people, real people, the people who have seen their housing costs doubled, rising faster than any other G7 country, the 2 million people lined up at food banks, which is also double, the 50% increase, people who are part of the 50% more crime victims, or the 116% more gun crime victims since Trudeau took office, or the millions that are unemployed as our economy collapses, or the seniors who will struggle to put food on the table after our dollar tanked in the middle of all this chaotic clown show on Monday, now below 70 cents a litre for the first time in almost 2 decades. I worry about the workers whose wages are stagnant while American workers boom because our investment per worker has collapsed by 23%. I worry about the single moms who are struggling to pay for the massive increase in food prices that have gone up 37% faster in Canada than in the United States, something that coincided with the NDP Liberal carbon tax on farmers and truckers. I worry about the 28% of Canadians who said they're considering moving to another country because life has become so hellish after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. I worry about the children who will inherit the $1.2 trillion debt. More debt was added in the last 9 years of this NDP Liberal government than in all prior governments combined. I worry about the families who've lost who were among those who've lost people to drug overdoses. Now 47,000 Canadians have died, more than died in the Second World War after the NDP Liberals liberalized hard drugs and allowed our border to fly open. I worry about the people who've lost hope in this country. They are the ones we should be focused on. Instead, we're focusing on the chaotic clown show that is costing Canadians today. This cannot go on. With a U.S. president coming in threatening tariffs early next year, we cannot have a chaotic clown show running our government into the ground. What is clear is that Justin Trudeau does not have the confidence of Parliament. Since the last confidence votes happened, there have been 3 major developments. One, the leader of the Bloc says he's changed his mind. He no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister. 2, just today, Jagmeet Singh claimed that he no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister, albeit he intends to wait until he gets his pension, until he votes accordingly. But still, he says he's lost confidence. And then there are 18 Liberal MPs, including the former Deputy Prime Minister, who've all lost confidence in the Prime Minister. Add them all up and you have 70% of parliamentarians who do not have confidence in the Prime Minister. And in the middle of a trade, border, crime, and cost of living emergency. This cannot go on. And that is why, in just a few moments, I will be writing the Governor General, asking her to urgently reconvene Parliament and require a non-confidence vote so the Prime Minister can judge whether he stays in power, continuing to ruin our country, or whether we get an axe the tax election to allow Canadians to take back control of their lives and their country. With a Prime Minister who can take back control of our borders, our immigration, our spending, our cost of living, who will get rid of the GST on new homes and axe the carbon tax to bring down the cost of living, to show a strong, smart presentation to the incoming president with a new Prime Minister that has the brains and backbone to put Canada first. Thank you.
Comment vous allez faire pour convaincre Mr. Poilievre? Il n'y a rien qui l'oblige à vous écouter.
Nothing requires her to listen to you. How will you convince her to recall Parliament? Well, she has a responsibility to recall Parliament because Prime Minister has lost confidence of the House. In addition to having lost control, he's lost the control of our borders, immigration, spending, cost of living. He's also lost the control of his own party. I can show through public reports that he doesn't even have the confidence of his own party. 60 members of the Liberal Party are reported not to have confidence in him, so it's impossible for him to govern like that. We need a vote in the House of Commons before the end of the year so that we can hold elections where Canadians will be able to restore control over their lives and their country.
Mr. Poilievre, Brian Mulroney met with Ronald Reagan several months before becoming Prime Minister in 1984, and you have a direct line to the Vice President-elect through a member of your caucus. Why not reach out to the Trump administration before the next election to tell them to stop the devastating 25% tariff?
Well, I've already told them that they should stop tariffs from coming ahead on Canada. But I'm not the Prime Minister, and that's precisely why we need an axe the tax election. Because right now, it looks like a chaotic clown show that's costing Canadians. Right now, the incoming president, who's at his strongest moment, sees nothing but weakness from the NDP Liberal government. He has no idea who's in charge over here. He sees premiers saying one thing, other premiers saying other things, the Prime Minister hiding under his desk. We're still astonished that it's now been weeks since the U.S. President said he would maybe jokingly that Canada would be the 51st state. And it's incredible the Prime Minister of Canada has not responded to that, which just is an illustration of the absolute, total, pathetic weakness of Justin Trudeau and his entire chaotic government. The only way for me to have the moral authority to get a deal with incoming President Trump is to have the strength that comes from winning election and having a 4-year mandate so that I face him with a position of strength.
You said this week in a radio interview that prorogation in this scenario would be against the rules. Do you think that's the likely scenario? And if so, how would that compare to what Stephen Harper did in 2008 when he was facing a non-confidence vote and prorogued Parliament, which was quite controversial at the time?
Well, the difference is that in the Harper era, he prorogued to stop an undemocratic coalition from taking over against the will of the people. In this case, a prorogation would be to preserve an undemocratic coalition that has lost the confidence of both the House and of Canadians. If Jagmeet Singh this time is telling the truth, which remains to be seen, then he will join with me and write the Governor General. So in fact, I'm giving my letter not only to the Governor General, but I'm giving it to the leaders of the NDP and Bloc, and I'm encouraging them to write the Governor General as well, if they're serious about a non-confidence vote, to recall Parliament. I'll answer your questions. To recall Parliament and vote on whether we call a carbon tax election. Now, Mr. Singh, you know, right now, you've all once again been duped and reported without any criticism of what he's done. He's talking about holding a non-confidence vote in March. So we're going to have months and months and months of this total chaos if Jagmeet Singh gets his way. And it conveniently will get him his pension. So the whole 41 million Canadians are being held hostage by the pension of one man. So I'm asking Mr. Singh to put patriotism ahead of pension, sign a letter to the Governor General confirming in writing what he said in front of the cameras, that is, that he no longer has got confidence in this Prime Minister and that he is ready to go to an axe the tax election.
Is it possible to go to an election before Inauguration Day, or would you like to see it? How can you just like lay out?
The sooner the better. I mean,
it's
it's irresponsible for us not to go to an election. The absolute mayhem,
Inauguration Day?
If I could answer your question, every minute that this chaotic clown show goes on is irresponsible for Canada. The only way to put Canada first is to immediately elect a new Prime Minister who has the strength and smarts, the brains and backbone to put Canada first.
Last question. Comfortable with the democratic precedent of having the Governor General not only bring the House back, but set the agenda for that House of Commons. Would you tolerate that as Prime Minister in the future?
Well, I wouldn't tolerate anything that's going on right now. I think it's a total mayhem. I've never seen anything like it. It's hallucinogenic to imagine that the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister would resign the day she was supposed to introduce her fall budget. A budget that, by the way, we forget, is 55% bigger deficit than they promised, $62 billion in new inflation, and the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of 60 of his own MPs, and somehow he's clinging to power. We have a guy here who has lost control of everything, and yet he clings to power. This cannot go on. So what I'm proposing is the most democratic thing that can happen. Let's have a vote in the House to let Canadians have a vote at the ballot box to elect a new common sense government that will put Canada first. Thank you very much.
And there you have it, Pierre Poilievre, Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the Conservative Party. Oh, let's go back to the foyer. Apparently he's making his way back to the podium.
It just shows how weak he is. I've already said Canada will never be the 51st state. We are a proud people with a heroic past and a brilliant future. We are the best friend in the world to the United States, which is the greatest military and economic superpower the world has ever seen. The President has raised some concerns about the border and military. I will rebuild our border and our military to put those concerns to rest, but I will also defend our economy. We will bring home production to this country with massive tax relief and fast speeding up permits so that we are less reliant and more strengthened against these kinds of risks. And all of that will be good for Canadians, it will be good for Americans. What we really need, though, President Trump has made it clear he wants to put America first. Well, all the more to him, I'm going to put Canada first. Thank you.
And there you go. The door has closed as Pierre Poilievre concludes his news conference on Parliament Hill in the foyer of the House of Commons. He described what is happening today as a clown show. He went on to say that Justin Trudeau does not have the confidence of Parliament. The BQ has said so in recent weeks. The NDP said it earlier today, and he says when you add up the number of Liberal MPs, including former Deputy Prime Minister Kristy who have expressed their lack of confidence in Trudeau's leadership, add those to the Bloc, the NDP, the Conservatives, you have about 70% of the House of Commons no longer feeling confident in Justin Trudeau's leadership as Prime Minister and the governance of the Liberal Party. So the Conservative leader says he will be writing to the Governor-General asking her to recall Parliament so that a vote of confidence can take place immediately. He also goes on to say that he will write to the leaders of both the Bloc Québécois and the NDP to call on them to also ask for the return of the House. So we'll be watching that on this very busy day. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us here on CPAC. A very busy day, as I said, the swearing in of a new cabinet, a letter from the NDP early this morning saying that they are now willing to vote against the government in a confidence motion, and now Pierre Poilievre saying that he will ask for the Governor-General to recall Parliament. All threads that we'll keep following for you here on CPAC. Do stay tuned for any more news coming up on this very busy day. Until then, we return you to regular programming.